Mid signs, labor shortages are easing in many industries. We're looking at 8 million job openings in April. That's the lowest in 3 years. However, still higher than the monthly average for the past 10 years. Let's get to the market. So we have the NASDAQ down about 0.1% or 21 points at 16,807. We have the S&P 500, little change, down 4 points at 5,278. The Dow up 0.1% at 74 points at 38,645. Over to the bond market, we have the 2-year yield at 4.78%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.36%. That's down 3 basis points. Quick check of commodities. We have spot gold lower at $2,318 an ounce. Brent crude, $77 a barrel. WTI crude at $72 a barrel. Also want to give an update on Berkshire Hathaway shares. Right now they're down nearly 2%. The New York Stock Exchange, though, saying it's going to cancel those bad trades following a software glitch that really sparked those trading halts, and it's also falsely displayed 99% drops in companies, including Berkshire Hathaway. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Alex.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa Mateo. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We cover all the top news in business and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence analysts. They cover 2,000 companies and 130 industries worldwide. And every once in a while, they let us take the show on the road. We get to broaden our outlook, particularly in the areas that really concern you as an investor. And we are here from the unbelievably huge Gaylord Opryland Resort in Nashville, Tennessee for BNY Mellon's 26th Annual Insight Conference. Speaking about over 2,000 financial intermediaries from top asset management firms will be here. And joining us now to discuss all of it is Emily Schlosser. She's Chief Operating Officer of BNY Mellon's Pershing, and she joins us here on set. Wonderful to see you.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be here.
And the highlight is that you're talking to Keith Urban on stage. Nice. Is that's happening today?
That's happening on Thursday morning, yes, and I agree, it will be the highlight.
So are you interviewing him or is he interviewing you?
Oh, for sure I'm interviewing him.
Okay, just checking.
Yes, he is the star of the show.
And what are you guys going to talk about?
There are a handful of things that we're going to cover. He has really interesting stories about his creative process, about overcoming diversity. He has a real emphasis on putting in the hard work, which is something that we're sort of all about here at Bank of New York Mellon. So there are a lot of things that are analogous, and he will be giving us a little bit of a show, too. So that'll be great.
Hey, Emily, we're looking around here, and there's, lots of financial advisors, registered investment advisors, lots of asset management providers. What are some of the, operationally, what are the challenges that these RIAs deal with every day when they're trying to establish relationships with clients, bring in new assets, manage the assets that they have? What are some of the challenges they face?
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to productivity and scale. Really, their biggest challenge is to free up advisors so that the advisors can spend more time with their clients. At Pershing, we've made it our mission to help advisors help more people, and we're doing that by creating the most connected and productive platform to power the future of wealth management. And that notion of automation and allowing RIAs and broker-dealers to operate at scale so that their advisors are spending less time doing administrative tasks in systems and more time out with their clients, that's really what it's all about.
How hard it is to do all that? To create that environment where people can just talk to their clients more.
Yeah, it's very challenging, and there's a reason why it's taken us kind of this long in the maturity of our industry to get to a point where we can really do that. We've seen studies that say advisors spend as much as 60 or 70% of their time doing administrative tasks. And so part of what we've done in rolling out a new advisory platform, which we launched at this conference last year, so it's the 1-year birthday of Wove, which is our advisory platform, is build from the ground up an interconnected suite of tools for advisors to use to manage their day-to-day. So it's not a patchwork of stuff that we've bought and tried to sort of stitch together. This is really from the ground up, from its inception. It was designed to be totally interconnected so that data flows seamlessly across the applications, everything works together, and advisors no longer have to kind of swivel between different applications, which just consumes an enormous amount of their time.
From a competitive perspective from BNY Mellon, how do you compete? Is it spending more on technology? How do you guys compete against your competitors out there?
Yeah, well, none of our competitors have the force like we have with
Is that the
Bank of York
Fidelities of the
Mellon
world
behind
and
us.
those types of people?
Fidelity, Schwab
Okay.
are some of the big players in our space. And really what we have with the entire ecosystem of Bank of New York Mellon is completely unique because we do have a massive technology organization that we can bring to bear with incredible amounts of investment spent on things like resiliency, cybersecurity, as well as the latest and greatest in innovative tech, generative AI. So we have this whole kind of force behind us from a technology perspective. And then we also have a world-class investment management arm. We have world-class treasury services and payments capabilities. So it really creates this whole wrapper around our core custody offering that amplifies what we can bring to the market in a way that nobody else can.
I judge myself for asking this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. As Chief Operating Officer, how do you use AI and generative AI?
Oh, interesting. So we are using AI in a lot of different ways. It's been available on our platform for some time with natural language search and greater ability to navigate. All of our navigation prompts are customized based on what consumers use most, so it is learning along with the user to make the experience more user-friendly and personalized. And we are leveraging tools that help us automate things like processing documents and running more of our operations straight through. We are playing quite heavily with generative AI, particularly internally for now, where we're able to kind of access information much more quickly and have the help of tools as we're kind of creating intel for our clients.
How about cybersecurity, just data security in general? I'm guessing that's a constant source of investment for you guys. How do you think about that?
Yeah, constant. It is one of the most impactful things that we can spend time on because the threats just keep amplifying kind of day over day. We see increasing threats from cyber challenges. And it's one of the reasons why having the Bank of New York Mellon behind Pershing's brand is so powerful. I mean, we are a 240-year-old bank. We pride ourselves on being incredibly resilient, and we really are at the cutting edge of what's happening in the cybersecurity world.
What are you most excited about for the rest of this year?
I'm really excited about what some of the new technologies can bring in terms of productivity and scale. I mean, at its core, generative AI is a productivity tool. Productivity is what we're all about, and I think it's one of the most kind of the biggest step changes in innovation that we've seen in recent history. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with it.
If you lose a group of advisors from your platform, why do they leave?
Interesting. It doesn't happen often. Sometimes it's because they have chosen to consolidate, go through M&A with a company that uses a different provider. So that's often what would drive the change. Sometimes it's a change in model or they're looking for an exit strategy, so they sell their firm. Those would be the biggest drivers.
What are the biggest questions that you're getting right now from your advisors?
Yeah, the biggest questions, I think, do revolve around how do we just make ourselves more productive, more efficient. Mm-hmm. But then we also do have a lot of questions around how do we get more into the alternative space? How do we become more effective in providing investment offerings to our clients? So historically, many advisors have also been portfolio managers. I think more and more we're seeing clients looking towards that centralized office of investment that can be leveraged as more of a central utility so that each advisor is not trying to be a portfolio manager in their own right, but are spending more time on things like financial planning and building relationships with clients.
Emily, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Emily Schlosser, Chief Operating Officer at BNY Mellon's Pershing. Good luck with Keith Urban.
Thank you.
It should be super exciting.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
I love this for you.
I love it for me too. Thank you.
And just a headline here that's kind of interesting here, Paul. Turkey apparently mulling taxing profits from stocks and crypto assets. Isn't that just capital gains?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Did we not do that?
Yeah, don't we do that already? I don't know about Turkey, but it was a red headline, so
we're going to read it. We're going to read it for you because it's red, and red means it's important.
And it's crypto.
And it's crypto, yes. So Turkey said to mulling taxing profits from stocks and crypto assets. More coming up from Nashville. This is Bloomberg.
headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger unveiled the chipmaker's latest products at a trade show in Taiwan. Bloomberg's Jess Menton has more.
It's a data center processor with more efficient cores that will allow operators to cut down the space required for a given task for a third of prior generation hardware. So you see Intel trying to step it up and compete with NVIDIA here.
Gelsinger also fighting back at NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. Claim that traditional processors are running out of steam in the age of AI. Intel shares, they're down about 0.4%. NVIDIA shares down about 0.1%. Apple shares, well, they're a little changed right now. Shares that rose, though, nearly 1% in yesterday's trading, and that was enough to pull the stock back in positive territory for the year. We also have some airplane moves. Sources say Airbus negotiating a major sale, more than 100 aircraft to China. Airbus's ADR is down nearly 2%. And Turkish Airlines looking to buy 250 jets from Boeing. The plane maker continues to work to regain that customer and investor confidence. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun tells Bloomberg's Guy Johnson it's going to take as long as it takes to turn around quality control issues at Boeing.
Transparency of all things and relative to all cultures is about the most powerful word I've ever seen. Any company, especially large-scale companies who are willing to be transparent about everything, they'll suffer less. Because the minute you start to hide something in a big company, others notice, and they might hide.
Boeing up nearly 1%. What's moving the markets? That's shares of Bitcoin maker Core Scientific. They're soaring up 27%. It signed a 12-year contract with AI startup CoreWeave. And shares of Bath & Body Works, they're under pressure, down 11%. Its forecast fell short of expectations, overshadowing a better-than-expected performance in the first quarter. That is your company news at this hour. I'm Lisa Mateo.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland Resort at BNY Mellon's 26th Annual Insight Conference. We're going to have lots of details in the wealth management industry over the next hour and tomorrow as well. We're also going to keep you up to date on world and national news. And for that, we go to Michael Barr. Michael?
Thank you very much, Alex. Paul, Lisa. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling party is poised to lose its majority in parliament, forcing him to rely on allies to form a government. It is a stunning blow to a leader who has dominated Indian politics since he first took power a decade ago. Raghuram Rajan, professor of finance at Chicago Booth School of Business and former head of the Central Bank of India.
I think it's a splendid result because it tells the government it needs to change course. The old course was unviable.
Modi, however, claimed victory for his coalition, saying it is a historical feat and signaled that he intends to return as prime minister for a third term. Hunter Biden's trial is underway today with opening statements. President Biden's son is accused of lying on a form to obtain a firearm. He was battling addiction at the time. President Joe Biden is expected to announce he will temporarily close the U.S.-Mexico border to migrants whenever numbers of illegal crossings become excessive. Meanwhile, a group of Michigan Republican lawmakers held a news conference blasting Biden's border policies, saying this move isn't enough. Michigan Republican Party Chairman Pete Hoekstra.
Two of the most important things I learned while at the border in Texas and Eagle Pass was two things Joe Biden could do today. One is do the Remain in Mexico policy that President Trump had. And number two is implement the laws that are currently on the books saying if you're found in the country illegally or if you cross into the country illegally, you have to go back to your country of origin and you cannot apply for any legal immigration status for at least 10 years.
Michigan Republican Party Chairman Pete Hoekstra. Right now, Attorney General Merrick Garland is testifying before a House Judiciary Committee. It comes just weeks after the committee advanced a contempt of Congress resolution against him. Garland defied their request for audio recordings from the federal probe into President Biden's handling of classified records. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Paul and Alex.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael Barr. Here is a story that I could not love more. If you live in a major city like London or New York City, you know that there are bikes everywhere, and that a huge push is to get regular people like Paul and I to take bikes to and from work and home to avoid the congestion in the train and to avoid the congestion as well in sitting in a cab or something along those lines. Apparently, London and New York are offering basic cycling training skills and education programs aimed at women and minority groups to help close, apparently, cycling's stubborn access gaps and get more riders to take a bike.
The city bikes here in New York City, I think they're widely used, the traditional pedal ones and then the electric ones as well. But the problem we have in New York and others is these illegal bikes that are out there for all the delivery people, and that's a disaster. One of the great failures of my life was one of my 4 offspring did not learn how to ride a bike.
What?
She just never took to it, and then I think she just got frustrated. And so now she is a 28-year-old adult living in Brooklyn, and she's going to be taking lessons, which there's a thing. Apparently there's a lot of adults out there who don't know how to ride bikes, and they get together and see if they can get it done.
That's amazing. That's exactly what the story is.
I know.
It's basically,
I know.
But I have to also think if you're riding a bike in the middle of New York City, it's also somewhat defensive biking. Like, I can ride a bike, but no way am I riding a bike in the middle of Midtown.
No. Even in Central Park, there's people go flying through there.
And there's still cars in there.
Yep.
But apparently this is a big push to get bicycling literacy up to snuff so people ride the bikes and stop taking cabs and emitting emissions.
Right. So, I mean, again, in New York City, there's bike lanes everywhere, much to the consternation of, Mr. John Tucker, our congestion reporter. And because they just take up a lot.
He needs a bike.
He needs a bike is what he
needs to take the
park at
path
60th
and then
Street.
the bike.
That's right, the path.
At like 3 in the morning. All right, coming up, we're going to have much more from BNY's 26th Annual Insight Conference right here in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fats?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are 2 big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, folks, Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney. We are live here in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland Resort Hotel, the BNY Mellon Insight Conference, 2,000 financial advisors here. A lot of smart people walking around here. We're going to be chatting with them coming up in the next hour. We're going to kick this off. We're going to talk to Woo Jin Hu, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Technology Analyst. He's out in Vegas at a conference. We're going to talk maybe HPE earnings coming up. Maybe talk a little bit about Dell because that stock has just been ripping. And then we're going to check in with Ben Harrison and Serena Dalby-Brookshire, 2 leaders at BNY Mellon's Pershing business. Talk to them about their business and the future of the wealth management business. We'll do that live here from Nashville, Tennessee. Let's kick this hour off right now with Mr. Charlie Pellet in a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. Paul and Alex, we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all trading lower. The bond market climbed after data showed further signs of labor market cooling, and that reinforced speculation that the Fed will be able to cut interest rates this year. Right now, we have got the S&P 500 index down 14, a decline right now of 0.3%. Dow Industrials down 14, little change there. NASDAQ lower by 47, a decline of 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.35% with a 2-year now yielding 4.77%. Gold down 1.4%, 23.17 the ounce, and a further retreat for crude oil today. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.8%, now below $73 a barrel, 72.85 right now on WTI. As for the Federal Reserve, Kelsey Barrow is Executive Director for Fixed Income at JP Morgan Investment Management.
The Fed's done hiking. We think the bar to restarting hiking is very high, and there's a ton of policy space for the Fed to respond if things start to weaken.
Kelsey Barrow of JP Morgan Investment Management. Sources tell Bloomberg CoreWeave, a closely held computing provider, has offered to acquire Core Scientific for $5.75 a share. Shares of Core Scientific They're surging now by 31.6%. Again, recapping, stocks lower. S&P down 14, drop there of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. The other big story we're keeping our eye on is India's election. The stock market has completely plummeted here, raising about $386 billion in market value. The tally signaled that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling party was struggling to win a majority of seats, and that was very much a surprise. Narendra Modi is speaking right now as well. We've been waiting for this address to the nation, and he's finally speaking. Joining us, Dan Strumpf, Bloomberg senior reporter in New Delhi. What do we know from what Narendra Modi is saying right now?
Well, I mean, it's looking like Modi and his BJP party, which has ruled India with quite a substantial majority for the last 10 years, is going to be losing its majority in the parliament and is going to have to form a government with its coalition partners. So it's really a major electoral setback for Modi, an electoral setback for the BJP, and I mean, more than anything, just quite a surprise to everybody here today. I mean, the ruling party was going into this election very optimistic, very confident of expanding its majority in parliament, of getting a 2/3 majority with its alliance partners, and it's looking like a total reversal on all those fronts.
So, Dan, what are the people saying here? What are the voters saying here? What don't they like? What are they pushing back on in terms of the Modi administration?
Well, one message that's emerging is that there's a real sort of simmering discontent with the economy that propelled a lot of voters at the polls during this election. I mean, you know, we know that India's really a big economic success story. I mean, 8% economic growth in the most recent fiscal year. You know, really a growing presence on the world stage and a rising manufacturer. But below the surface, there's a lot of issues. There's issues with high levels of joblessness, rising inflation, widening inequality. I mean, these are all issues that have really, you know, grown in salience over the last 10 years, and that Modi and the BJP have really struggled to address. And these are issues that the opposition really seized upon in this campaign.
All right, Dan, thanks a lot. We really appreciate looking forward to hearing more what Narendra Modi will say in this national address. Dan Stumpf, Bloomberg senior reporter in New Delhi, joining us in those Indian elections. All right, let's get you some market drivers here. It's a macro story, sure, but there are a lot of fun individual stock stories that we're watching. And Bailey Lipschultz, Bloomberg News senior equities reporter, joins us now. Bailey, what is top of mind for you today?
Top of mind, Alex, the worst performer in the S&P 500 today, Bath & Body Works, down 12.5%. First quarter results were actually pretty strong. Second quarter guidance, though, lagging expectations. Seemed like looking through some of the analyst notes, basically saying that there's a lot of uncertainty around what the middle of the year could look like for the company as it navigates a tougher consumer environment. But I would say something that surprised me was on a trailing 12-month basis before the print, Bath & Body Works was up 37%, ticker BBWI, so outperforming the S&P 500 ahead of the results, but giving back a chunk.
Is this a meme stock thing?
I hope not, but it felt like it felt like a name that maybe was caught up back in 2021, but definitely trading on fundamentals, actually delivering $1.38 billion in net sales, something that a number of those meme stocks can't talk about as well.
About energy stocks, I think we have some interest here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Alex's bread and butter, worst performing group of the major 11 index, major 11 sectors on the S&P 500. Energy's S5ENRS on your terminal down 1.6%, trading at the lowest level since March. This coming is crude down right now 1.7%, trading at just below a 73 handle, lowest level since early February. That's why we're seeing names like ExxonMobil down 2.5%, Diamondback Energy down 2.5%, Devon Energy down 2.3%, really just following oil prices lower this coming after an OPEC announcement over the weekend that was widely seen as planned to add back production following coordinated cuts from members, which could create an oversupply of crude. So market's really working itself out. But again, Alex, as you mentioned, we are in kind of a macro-driven day after some economic data, lower than normal volumes, but it does seem like energy, along with materials, utilities, are providing some of the biggest drags to the S&P 500.
So, Alex, why do you think energy is pulling back? Is it just, I mean, oil's pulling back. We got WTI crude below 73. Is it just kind of trading?
It's too much supply out there.
Too much supply.
Yeah. RBC had a great note out today that talked about how stocks are actually building at the moment. And even if you see oil, but one upside to oil prices, if you could say that, a floor, if you will, is that China likes to replenish oil under 80, so that could provide a floor for it, but there's just a lot of supply out there, sloshing around, not necessarily coming from OPEC, and not to forget that a lot of those countries, like Iraq, for example, and Kazakhstan, are not abiding by their quotas, and they're going to crack down on that, but okay, show me the evidence, guys.
Okay, so more of a supply issue than necessarily a demand call.
It seems like it, yeah.
All right, Bailey, anything else?
Yeah, keeping an eye on Core Scientific. Charlie mentioned it. Bloomberg reporting that CoreWeave, a closely held cloud computing company, offered to buy Core Scientific for $5.75 a share. Right now trading at $6.39, so trading above that offer price. Core Scientific, a super interesting company, was a Bitcoin miner, now transitioning into potential data centers and that AI theme. That's why we're seeing this potential all-cash bid, according to a Bloomberg News report. Another thing that stands out to me, guys, this is a company that went public via de-SPAC a number of years ago, actually emerged from Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January. So a lot of interesting things at play. But if this does actually go the route that our Jillian Tan reported, and they do get acquired by CoreWeave, interesting to see how that plays out. Again, given that that offer was at $5.75, it's trading at $6.40. I talked to a couple people who have kind of argued that some of the news of a pact with CoreWeave earlier this morning could drive a higher offer, but it'll be something that we're going to keep a close eye on.
All right, very good. Bailey Lipschultz, he covers all the equities for Bloomberg News, including the meme stocks. One can say that's how one of the ways he built his career as the meme stock reporter
like
back
20?
in the day. I know, exactly, exactly. All right,
kidding, Bailey.
all right. Let's switch gears here. Let's talk a little technology, which means we're going to talk a little AI, which means we need to talk to Woo Jin Ho. Woo Jin Ho is a senior technology analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Hey, Woo, I know we got HP Enterprises results are tonight. Just remind us what HP Enterprises is and what are you looking for here?
Sure. Hey, Paul. Hey, Alex. So HP Enterprises is the enterprise side of HP post-split. So essentially they sell servers, storage, and networking equipment to corporate IT systems. A couple of things to look out for is AI server sales. It underperformed last quarter. I do expect them to outperform and potentially beat this quarter. I have them forecasted at around $3.8 billion in AI server sales, up 30% on a year-on-year basis. And the other thing is on their networking side, that's been an underperformer for not only HPE, but also for the rest of the group. I think the street is a little bit hot on the networking side, and that might miss numbers, but quite frankly, all eyes are on how strong is HPE's AI servers for the quarter.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So we've talked a lot about on the show with you that the corporate IT budgets are not growing. Oops, sorry about that. Not growing, they're just moving, and they're moving from, say, cloud to AI. Where does HPE sit in the middle of that?
And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things with HPE where their AI products just don't stand on par with someone like a Dell or a Supermicro. Their heritage has largely been on the supercomputing side. I do think things will change. One thing that I can say is that they had about $3 billion in AI server backlog, and that should start to materialize going into the second half of the year. To give the $3.8 billion in context relative to the rest of the group, Dell is, I have them forecasted to be about $7.8 billion for this year, and Supermicro could potentially be about $12 billion in AI servers alone. So they're really lagging behind the peers. So that's why I think that the street, as well as myself, might be a little bit light on the AI server side. And if that does surprise, that might change the story to HPE's narrative.
So I'm just looking at the HPE stock, Wooj. It's up about 5% year to date. So it's clearly not received that AI multiple expansion and boost that some other names have. Is that something they're gunning for? Is that something that is a realistic goal for them? How do they kind of think about their AI business lines?
Yeah, so part of it is more of the product portfolio, Paul. That they are lacking some of the key features that that their peers offer. I do think that in a couple of weeks from now, they have their enterprise user conference in a couple of weeks called HP's Discover. And one tidbit that I can share for you and the audience is that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang is going to share the stage with the HPE CEO. So I do expect some interesting product news that may come out that might, again, change HP's fortunes on the AI server side.
Let's just take a comparison to Dell for a second. So Dell was outperforming for sure HPE, had a good quarter. By all accounts, numbers are really solid and the stock drops. So, and HPE has underperformed Dell. So is it sort of like anything that's okay is going to help the stock, or is it not that simple?
Yeah, so let's look at it from a multiple standpoint, right? From a multiple standpoint, Dell pre-earnings was trading around 21 times. Expectations are really high. The hardware space typically trades at around 8 to 9 times, and Dell fell short of bookings expectations, which led to the drop. The other thing that compounded Dell's stock drop, Alex, is the profitability. There's this narrative out there that AI servers had a zero profit margin, operating profit margin. And we did some analysis there. We don't think that's true. It is below segment margins, but it is probably running around more like 3 to 5%. But there's a profit story on the AI server front that dinged Dell, as well as an order story. Now, HPE, like as Paul alluded to, they didn't get that multiple bump. It's trading like around 9.5 times because the AI story hasn't really caught on yet. And if it does catch on, it might get an earnings re-rating, a valuation re-rating for if investors rethink that AI story for HPE.
Hey, Wooj, I know you have a research note out on Dell just this morning. I know you're taking a look at the sales growth. You're taking a look at the profitability here. What's your takeaway from your research?
I will tell you, we raised our Dell AI server forecast from 5.6 billion to 7.8 billion, right? And that's primarily because of how strong the first quarter is. There's a couple of things to take into consideration here, Paul. I still think that 7.8 billion might be conservative, and I'll tell you why. If I look at the second half of their fiscal year, they're bumping along 1.7 billion per quarter, which is equivalent to the first quarter results. There's a couple of tailwinds going on. Number one, NVIDIA's new Blackwell platform. Those servers go for around $3 million a pop. That's 3 to 4 times higher than the H100, the Hopper platform that NVIDIA offers. So you have an ASP bump that's going to help. And the other thing is that I don't think Dell has the necessary visibility that they hope to get, because at the end of the day, GPUs are still on allocation, and we're all still living in NVIDIA's world right now, and they're at the mercy of what NVIDIA's willing to give Dell. So they really can't provide a good guidance to the second half of the year for the AI server side. So if all things go well, there's still upside to the numbers.
Well, Jim, before I let you go, what else is front of mind right now for you?
I mean, front of mind, it's, right now I'm at the Cisco investor meeting today. Not going to be the most exciting story today. They're probably going to talk about the recovery story. And then I have an Arista investor day tomorrow as well. And there's actually a good head-to-head battle between Arista and NVIDIA on the AI networking front. And that's going to drive the valuations for Arista if they tell a good story tomorrow.
All right, Wooj, thanks a lot. We really appreciate Woojin Ho joining us. He is Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Technology Analyst joining us. We talked about a little bit HPE earnings. That stock down by about 0.5% and reporting after the closing bell. A little bit of Dell Cisco day. I mean, he's excited.
Yeah.
I mean, he's excited
it's in
about
Vegas.
Cisco.
It's in Vegas. So,
he's not in Vegas, though, so that's less cool.
I think he is.
He is in Vegas. I was in Princeton.
No, I think he's in Vegas,
actually. I can't see stuff.
I know, yeah, he's in Vegas, so yeah, I heard some chips falling in the background. That's what that's about. That's how he rolls. So, but that's how the technology companies, they do it. But again, it's really interesting to say, how do you play this AI trade? I think investors are just still trying to figure it out. Yes, I got NVIDIA. Maybe I buy some of the software names, but how else in that software and hardware stack. How do I play it? So.
Yeah, and you're looking at the NASDAQ off by about 0.3%. Volume's a little light, though. And do you see sort of diversification when it comes to the equity market? Are we just kind of stuck with the Mag 7, and that's kind of the only way to gain some traction there? Ben Harrison, Head of Wealth Solutions at BNY Mellon's Pershing, will be joining us after the break, right here from Nashville, Tennessee. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the S&P 500 index lower, as is the NASDAQ Composite Index. The Dow swinging between gains and losses. Right now, the Dow is higher. We're looking at a gain of 14 points, up less than 0.1%. A little change there. S&P down 10, drop there of 0.2%, while NASDAQ is down 30, a decline of 0.2%. The bond market climbed after data showing further signs of labor market cooling reinforced speculation. The Federal Reserve will be able to cut interest rates this year. 10-year, 4.34%, with a 2-year that's now yielding 4.77%. Spot gold down 1%, $23.26 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1%, $73.45 a barrel. Airbus is said to be negotiating a major sale of A330neo aircraft to China, with talks gaining momentum since President Xi Jinping visited his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, last month. Sources say the largest Chinese airlines are considering buying more than 100 of the upgraded A330 models. ADRs of Airbus, they're down now by 2.3%. Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the French Open with an injured right knee, ending his title defense and meaning he will relinquish the #1 ranking. Recapping, the Dow now negative on the day, down 4 points, little changed. S&P down 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news and analysts from our Bloomberg Intelligence arm. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries around the world. And for now, we are lucky because we're broadcasting live from Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland Resort for BNY Mellon's 26th annual Inside Conference with over 2,000 financial intermediaries from top asset management firms. And joining us right here on set for BNY Mellon's Pershing. It's good to have you here, Ben. Thanks for stopping by.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So your panel, which is Thursday, is The Future of Financial Advice, Perspectives on the Evolution of Wealth Management. That seems nice and broad for you. What are you going to say? What's on the docket? What's on your mind?
Yeah, so it's going to be a great panel. We've got a number of industry experts that are going to join me, and what we're going to talk about is there's really been a bull market for financial advice. If you look back over the last 10 years, the wealth business has grown from 23 trillion to 52 trillion. It's really fueling the need for investors to have great advice from advisors. The conundrum is we're not creating more advisors. There's about 300,000 advisors. So it's really teeing up this productivity imperative that advisors need to deliver more for their clients and do so with more scale.
So we're speaking with Ben Harrison, Head of Wealth Solutions at BNY Mellon's Pershing here in Nashville. Ben, can you explain the reason why I would leave a wirehouse like Merrill Lynch and become a registered investment advisor at an independent place?
Sure. So a lot of that demand is being driven by investors. Investors really are seeking fiduciary advice, comprehensive, holistic advice, an advisor that sits on the same side of the table as them and isn't sold products, but really it purchases products to fulfill a goal-based financial plan. So advisors are seeking an opportunity to be aligned with their clients, and that gives them the opportunity to go out, establish a registered investment advisor, and have full control in order to provide that experience.
There's no more Merrill Lynch stockbrokers. Aren't they advisors too? Haven't they evolved that business?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a convergence in the business models towards this goal-oriented, holistic advice. So there's absolutely, we're seeing that from both sides of the market right now, and that's creating a lot of competition in the space.
Okay, so what is your advice for wealth managers, say, in the back half of this year?
Yeah, so we've been experiencing a market that, continues to have tailwinds, but clients have a ton of complexity in their lives. So it's all about focusing on the client needs and having a very clear optimal client profile and delivering the solutions that an investor needs in order to solve anything that they may need to deal with in their personal lives.
Every town USA has a Smith Barney office, a Morgan Stanley office, I should say, a Merrill Lynch office, plus 3 or 4 registered advisors offices. Does there need to be consolidation among the RIAs, or is it better to be able to, hey, we're small, we're local, we know our clients? How's that trend evolving?
Yeah, we are seeing a tremendous amount of consolidation in the space. The mergers and acquisitions that we see in terms of aggregators and roll-ups coming into the space and taking out some of the smaller firms and rolling them into wealth practices is absolutely happening. It's not slowing down. That's going to continue to accelerate. But at the same time, there is room for advisors to have unique value propositions for clients in communities. And what we've seen is that clients have a propensity to work with people. Despite the fact there are so many digital solutions and ways to leverage AI and other unique capabilities in the marketplace, investors want to work with a person, and if you can deliver a great value proposition, then you've got a business to be had.
So what is the right RIA model, the Registered Investment Advisor model? Like, what is the right model for someone?
I think it all depends on what the client need is. It depends on where they are in their life cycle. Are they at the stage of their life where they are accumulating assets? Are they at the stage of life where they're planning for retirement or drawing down? Are they a mass affluent investor? Are they a high net worth investor? Are they an ultra high net worth investor? And there are flavors of registered investment advisors as well as broker dealers and as you mentioned, other financial professionals that solve for a variety of those different needs.
We've been coming to this event for several years now, and a common theme has been you want your advisors to be able to spend more time with their clients, less time on the administrative work. Is that just a function of technology, integrating technology more into the everyday work of an advisor?
Yeah, that's we talked a little bit about that in terms of this productivity imperative. We know that there's a significant demand for advice. There is not as many advisors to fulfill that demand, so it's really incumbent that we have the right tools and technology so that advisors can spend more of their time with clients and less of their time working on the back office or the tools in which to do so. That's a big focus on our strategy at Pershing in our mission to help advisors help more people. And a lot of the tools and technology that we are showcasing at this event does just that. We're excited about rolling out some of the new things that we have with our Wove platform.
Here's something just broader. Everyone's just living longer. And there's a question as to sort of like, when should you retire? How much money do you really need for retirement? And nobody really knows the answer to any of this. How do you talk to clients about that? Because I have to think that is a huge worry. And when you normally retire at like 65, but then you're dying at 70, that's one thing. But that's not happening anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is something that advisors really need to work with, and investors need to really consider the lifespan that they potentially have in front of them, including health benefits and health care. That we see, this idea of advisors delivering more, it's getting well beyond just investments. It used to be an investment game. Now it is a planning game of all the complexities of one's lives, whether it be health care, whether it be long-term care, whether it be benefits that advisors need to think about. So we're seeing lifetime income becoming a very important tool that's utilized in a comprehensive portfolio. Insurance, tax, all of these things.
I have permanent life insurance. Like, I got that when I was like 36 because I'm so terrified of like what happens when there is no Social Security and I'm like 80 and I need assisted living.
Well, absolutely. And for the emerging population coming up, it's going to be completely different for us than it was for generations ahead of us.
Well, what are some other big themes that you guys talk about a lot? Like, what's the next year? What are we going to be talking about next year at this conference?
So there's a lot on the horizon that we think about each and every day in our business. We see artificial intelligence, playing a big role in the marketplace right now. We see alternative investments continuing to emerge and rise in terms of getting into the retail investing population. You hit on a couple of the other things in terms of the longevity of portfolios and that people are living longer. So there's a tremendous amount of things that people are thinking about in terms of navigating how you contend with that with your personal finances.
What do you think about alternative investing in terms of the conversation with wealth managers right now?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an uptick in terms of the appetite for alts in retail investors' portfolios. We know that they've been utilized in institutional portfolios for years and years, and now they are taking a strong place in the individual investor portfolio. And and we're moving away from a 60-40 type of allocation to one that includes alternative investments as a important part of the individual investor portfolio.
Ben, thanks so much. We really appreciate you stopping by. I know it's quite busy for you, but thank you. Ben Harrison, Head of Wealth Solutions at BNY Mellon's Pershing, joining us right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Coming up, we're going to continue this conversation with Serena Dalla Brookshire, a Chief Product Officer at BNY Mellon's Pershing. Product innovation and management. How do you wind up doing that? We're going to break all of that down for you. Michael Barr is here with World and National.
Thank you very much, Alex. Ball, Charlie. Narendra Modi vowed to continue as India's prime minister even after his party lost its majority in parliament. It forces him to rely on allies to form a government for the first time since gaining power a decade ago. Rajan is a professor of finance at Chicago Booth School of Business and former head of the Central Bank of India.
It's actually a win for democracy, and that's good for India, because what democracy does is it allows the different parts to essentially express themselves and to negotiate. The problem earlier was India was trending towards a more autocratic country, a country with one leader who had a larger-than-life image. And that, unfortunately, meant that the BJP leadership wasn't listening.
The vote count will continue throughout the day. Attorney General Merrick Garland is in the hot seat today, testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. The Republican-led committee is claiming the Justice Department's recent investigations are politically motivated. Garland pushed back.
I will not be intimidated, and the Justice Department will not be intimidated.
AG Garland says Republicans' accusations and rhetoric are creating a dangerous environment for DOJ employees. President Biden plans to sign an executive order that would effectively prevent new asylum claims until migrant crossings drop by about 2/3 from where they are right now. More with Bloomberg's Bill Ferries.
You're talking about, almost more than half of the asylum seekers at the April levels, but we've had levels of 10,000 per day at some points in this crisis. So it would be a real sharp curtailment from what we've seen at kind of the peak periods of the immigration flow across the border.
In tennis, defending champ Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the French Open with a knee injury. Global News 24 hours a day and whenever you want it.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Stocks are lower across the board. In fact, right now we've got the S&P at just about the lows of the morning. S&P down 19, drop there of 0.4%. The Dow down 40, a decline of 0.1%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index is down 66 right now, a drop of 0.4%. Treasury yields dropped across the curve after a report showed job openings fell to the lowest in over 3 years. Fed swaps are pricing in a faster pace of 2024 rate cuts after this morning's data. 10-year right now, 4.34%, with a 2-year right now, 4.77%. Gold is down 1%, down $23 the ounce to $23.27. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.4%, $73.21 a barrel on WTI. The Labor Department this morning reported job openings are down amid signs labor shortages are easing in many industries. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
We're looking at 8 million job openings in April. That's the lowest in 3 years and consistent with a gradual slowdown in America's labor market. However, it's still higher than the monthly average for the past 10 years. Labor shortages persist in low-wage industries such as hotels and restaurants and retailers. Looking ahead, the government issues May payroll data on Friday, and economists are forecasting somewhat faster growth than in April. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
A new poll finds many Americans still are not sold on going electric for their next car purchase. About 4 in 10 adults say they would be at least somewhat likely to buy an EV the next time they buy a car, according to a poll by the Associated Press and the Energy Policy Institute of the University of Chicago. 46% they say they are not too likely or not at all likely to buy an EV. Among U.S.-based EV makers, Tesla lower by 0.7%, Rivian now down by 1%. Recapping stocks lower, S&P down 20 points, lower by 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pello, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney, we are live in Nashville, Tennessee. We are at the Gaylord Opryland Resort in Nashville here for the BNY Mellon Insight Conference. They've got about 2,000 financial advisors here, and they're talking about the future of the wealth management business. Our next guest is Serena Dalla Bookshire. She is the Chief Product Officer for BNY Mellon. What kind of products are you hearing from your wealth advisors about digital?
Absolutely. So on the digital side,
crypto, I'm thinking generally broadly defined. You know, what kind of are they asking you about crypto?
I think that there is, maybe reduced interest in that at the moment, but I think that overall, we exist to serve a wide variety of product sets on our shelves, and so as we continue to monitor the regulatory landscape around that, that's something that we could explore in the future. But as I would say, from a broader digital standpoint, really, what we hear the most of is around productivity and scale, and ultimately, really, how do we help our advisors do their best work by ultimately giving them the time back through connected tech, connected data, and connected experiences.
And we're speaking with Serena Dalla Bookshire, Chief Product Officer at BNY Mellon's Pershing. We're talking about product innovation. So what's the product that you've launched, say, in the last year that has really helped those issues that you're trying to address? Just making wealth advisors more efficient and more able to spend time with their clients.
Yeah, so some of them you'll hear about later this afternoon, but what I can share where I feel like there's a lot of really good energy around this is within our NetX 360 platform. We built a lot around personalization, and so how that takes shape, investing in AI and emerging capabilities, is ultimately personalized menus, personalized navigation. We actually recently implemented a feature around asking a question to really reduce the time spent on reporting and compliance-related analytics. And ultimately, something that took upwards to 20 to 30 minutes now takes a mere matter of seconds. So that's one innovation that we're really excited about and want to continue to press on as we think about different ways for our advisors and their teams to do more with less.
Are they always open to technology, or are some folks, just like in life, less open to it? Maybe older or something like that?
I mean, product adoption certainly has a spectrum of early to late adopters.
Yep.
But ultimately, right, as you think about ways that actually benefit you, we've seen a lot of adoption, right? Because ultimately, as you've probably heard in some of these other segments, right, there's a finite amount of advisors today, a proliferation of high quality advice, and advisors need to adapt their practices and how they work to meet those demands.
How does it usually work? Like, do your clients come to you and say, hey, I really need help with this? Or is it you being like, you really need help with that, you just don't know it yet?
Great question. And actually, part of one of the things that we instituted in this new product organization was really around how we work. And so part of our philosophy is we need to be client obsessed, data driven, and we need to have direct sort of co-creation with our client base. And so that's something that we've been really kind of pushing towards. And so ultimately, it's a combination of us looking at market data, monitoring the trends, working hand in hand with our advisors to understand kind of the pain points, observing them directly, looking at say-do gaps. What do you say? What do we hear? What do we observe? And figuring out ways to kind of build solutions that really are steeped in that problem space.
So what's a say-do gap? I've never heard this before. Did you know this?
It's like when you say you want to lose weight, but then your pantry is full of potato chips, right? So it's sort of that say-do gap around what you say and what you actually do, and sort of the gap between.
Oh, like I want more sleep, but then I don't go to bed early.
Correct.
Ah, okay. Now I got you. Okay.
So, Serena, talk to us about what are some of the trends you're seeing there in products. What are your clients asking you for more of, better of, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so on the digital side, as I mentioned, right, they want, streamlined workflows. They want more efficient ways to onboard clients. They want ways to sort of scale their practice. They want new tools to connect all of the various systems and data so that they don't have the swivel chair, so they don't have to sort of context switch in the moment. And we're finding that on average, that saves almost about 2+ hours a day.
Oh my gosh.
And then from an investment standpoint, right, there's a lot around, alternatives being sort of a growth area, right, especially with the expansion of the private markets and just overall impact on investment outcomes. And then clearly, right, growth in ETFs, so looking for different flavors to fill the portfolio. Maybe one last thing I'll add is just, we see more and more investors driving the conversation. So 90% of investors want an advisor that, quote unquote, gets me, right? And so what that means is, and then 70% actually want an advisor that shares their personal values. And so what that means as an advisor, you got to know your clients really, really well, and you got to be able to spend the time with them. And so ultimately, what we're trying to do here is help advisors help more people. And so we believe that the combination of these sort of investment solutions and connected digital solutions gets advisors closer to that.
What are some of the problems that you foresee that product will need to solve for that just don't have answers yet?
That doesn't have answers yet. I mean, I think that, looking at broader sort of access, I think we're starting to see a lot of democratization of products and sort of bringing institutional products more down market. I think that you'll continue to see more of that as a trend, just so more and more people have access to high quality advice and high quality products. And then I think, as you look at managed accounts and advice more generally, like how do you ensure the most efficient way to deliver that? I think those are some areas. And then maybe one more is just we're seeing more and more clients really want to have like their full balance sheet together. They want the ease of seeing, if you are an advised client, to have your wealth solutions and your banking together. Makes sense. And so that's where you're going to start to see some of that also come together over time.
Serena, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Serena Dalla Brookshire, Chief Product Officer, BNY Mellon's Pershing, joining us live here in this vast, what do we call this room here? Like just a
oh my gosh, I don't know.
Auditorium.
It is enormous.
Yeah,
it is huge.
It's huge, and this is where it's all happening. So here we're at Nashville. We're at the Gaylord Grand Ole Opry. I did some business with the Gaylord family back in the day when they owned TNN, the cable network, and they owned Country Music Television. So in addition to all these resorts they have here, so some good times down here. But this place is massive. It's got everything you want down here. It's a great place to have a conference, because plus you also have access to Nashville and all the stuff that's there.
I feel like resort is like an understatement, though. Like I literally have an app that I had to use to get directions on where to get from my hotel room to here, like Google Maps.
Yep.
Like that's not resort. That's, I don't know.
That's mega.
It's huge.
It's Vegas. Yeah. It's kind of like Vegas.
It is like
size.
Vegas. Absolutely.
Size.
Well, you certainly hit your step count.
Yes, exactly.
I'm hoping.
Exactly.
I'll check on that for you.
All right, we're gonna have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. American Airlines is pushing a federal appeals court to overturn a decision invalidating its partnership with JetBlue Airways, saying the ruling would prevent the airline from entering into future joint ventures. A lawyer for Americans says the trial judge's decision to invalidate the Northeast Alliance rested on a legal misunderstanding of how the antitrust laws operate. American up now 0.6%. JetBlue shares down 0.9%. It's going to take as long as it takes to turn around quality control issues at Boeing. That's according to CEO Dave Calhoun, who says the plane maker continues to work to regain customer and investor confidence after this year's door plug blowout on a 737 MAX. And Calhoun says transparency will be key.
Transparency of all things and relative to all cultures is about the most powerful word I've ever seen. Any company, especially large-scale companies who are willing to be transparent about everything, they'll suffer less. Because the minute you start to hide something in a big company, others notice, and they might hide.
And the CEO of Boeing, Dave Calhoun, spoke with our Guy Johnson in a moderated discussion at the Berlin Aviation Summit. You can catch the full conversation on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. An Airbus is negotiating a major sale of A330neo aircraft to China, with talks gaining momentum since President Xi Jinping visited his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron last month. Sources say the largest Chinese airlines are considering buying more than 100 of the upgraded A330 models. And those are our top company stories at this hour. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. We are broadcasting live from the magnificent Gaylord Opryland Resort in Nashville, Tennessee for BNY Mellon's 26th Annual Insight Conference. We got over 2,000 financial intermediaries from top asset management firms, but we also got you updated on all the news. And for world and national news, we go right to Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Alex, Paul, Charlie. Attorney General Merrick Garland has been testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. The GOP-led panel is claiming the Justice Department's recent investigations are politically motivated. Garland, in his opening statement, also brought up the outrage from Republicans over former President Trump's conviction in New York and reiterates that the DOJ had nothing to do with it.
It comes alongside false claims that a jury verdict in a state trial brought by a local district attorney was somehow controlled by the Justice Department. That conspiracy theory is an attack on the judicial process itself.
AG Garland also points to an alarming spike in threats against law enforcement officials because, as he puts it, of Republican rhetoric. Federal prosecutors are painting President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, as a drug addict when he lied on federal forms to purchase a gun in 2018. Opening statements in his gun trial started this morning in Delaware. Prime Minister Narendra Modi claimed victory for his alliance today in India's general election, despite a lackluster performance from his own party. For the first time since Modi's ruling party swept into power in 2014, it appeared unlikely that it would secure a majority on its own. However, the Prime Minister's coalition was still expected to be elected to a third five-year term. President Biden plans to take on the migrant surge at the U.S.-Mexico border with an executive order he plans to sign today. Bloomberg's Jody Schneider has more from Washington.
A lot of what is in this order was a bill, a bipartisan bill that the Senate passed that would have given the president similar powers, but was blocked by Republicans at Donald Trump's behest earlier this year. So now President Biden has decided to kind of do this on his own, if you will, and it would halt certain asylum claims at the border until crossings fall dramatically.
By about two-thirds from current levels, according to Bloomberg's Jody Schneider. Big tennis news. Defending champ Novak Djokovic withdrew from the French Open with an injured right knee today. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With the Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Paul, Alex, Charlie.
All right, thank you so much, Michael Barr. You gasped at the
I did, the first time I heard
news.
it. Yeah, because, he's huge. And now he's getting to an age maybe we're going to start seeing injuries a little bit more often, which is not atypical, I guess.
No. All right, well, speaking of nothing, but there's a great article that's reading high on the Bloomberg terminal, and this has to do with Citi. It's boosting its U.S. parental leave and basically to compete with Wall Street rivals. The bank is increasing paid leave up to 24 weeks for birth parents, if you actually give birth. And they're also increasing their time off for staff to leave to help ailing family members. It's huge. And so this kind of puts them, so let's see, if we look at this great chart, because of course we're Bloomberg, so we have a chart. So Citigroup is at 24 weeks. If you're the primary caregiver and you're the birth giver, Morgan Stanley is the same. Go down, Wells Fargo just has 16 weeks and only 4 weeks for the secondary caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it across Wall Street. They're getting a lot better about kind of reacting to what their employees really need here. And I think what's really interesting is the care for failing member. As more and more people live longer, this is going to be a bigger issue for more working age people to deal with ailing and elderly, maybe parents, for example. And that's something that I think corporate America in general are just probably have to adapt with over the coming years. And hopefully Wall Street can be right on the forefront there.
Which weirdly dovetails to the wealth management world, right?
Yes,
because you need to live longer, so you need to prep for that. And as someone who's, of a certain age, you got the kids, you got the parents, you got to care for both. And how do you do that? So Citi making a step on that, looking at 24 weeks if you're a birth giver for maternity leave, I should say. Okay, so we did it. Day one down.
We'll be back tomorrow.
We will, right here in Nashville, Tennessee. That wraps it up for me and Paul. Balance of Power is up next with Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
Politics to the world of business. This is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
Joe Biden makes another run at the border. Welcome to the fastest show in politics as the president prepares to issue an executive order today that would lower illegal border crossings and, in fact, shut down the border if they reach a certain threshold. We'll share details on the plan, and we will discuss ahead with Maria Fernanda Bosmosky at the Atlantic Council. Gridlock returns to Congress as Republicans respond to Donald Trump's guilty verdict. We'll have more on that and what could be a cold summer for crypto with Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence and analysis from our signature panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano with us. And it's all after a look at Wall Street. We get to trading right now, middle of the day with Charlie Pellet in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. And we are looking, Joe Matthew, at a down day right now. Not just a down day, but lows of the session on the S&P 500 index. Right to the numbers here with the S&P down 23 at 52.60, a drop of 0.4%. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 64, a decline of 0.2%. The NASDAQ Composite Index right now down 68, a drop there of 0.4%. 10-year, 4.33% with a 2-year yielding 4.77%. Bond market is climbing after data this morning showed further signs of labor market cooling. Spot gold is trading lower by 1%, 23.27 the ounce on spot gold. West Texas Intermediate crude also lower right now, down 1.5%, 73.09 a barrel on WTI. Wall Street, meanwhile, is looking ahead to Friday's jobs report. Aditya Bave is senior U.S. economist at BofA Securities.
We're pretty optimistic. We're looking for 200,000 in job growth, which should be just fine. That's trend-like. That keeps the Fed very firmly on hold. Our view has been on the Fed that nothing changes until something changes. In other words, the data aren't strong enough for the Fed to worry about hiking, but the data aren't weak enough to warrant rate cuts just yet.
Aditya Bave of BofA Securities. Boston beer shares are lower. The CEO of cannabis producer Green Thumb is pitching a deal to merge with Boston Beer. That, according to the Wall Street Journal. Green Thumb says it is not commenting on market rumors. Meanwhile, brewer Suntory tells Bloomberg that it is not in takeover talks for Boston Beer. Right now, we've got shares of Boston Beer that uses the ticker SAM, as in Sam Adams, down 1.3%. Green Thumb shares up by 1.2%. Recapping, stocks lower, S&P down 24, drop there of 0.5%. Balance of power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power here on the radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube, where we invite you, as always, to join us in our live feed. Search Bloomberg Global News. When you get to YouTube, we'll meet you there in the studio where the lights are lit, and we have a lot to talk about. It's a beautiful day here in the nation's capital. Nice day for a picnic, you might say. And that's the big plan at the White House later. Imagine cats and dogs feasting on hamburgers and hot dogs. This is the big congressional picnic at the White House. Joe Biden, 6:15 p.m., South Lawn. There will be remarks. And it's going to come after the president. You'll witness all of this live today on Bloomberg. Speaks to the nation around 2 o'clock, that's at least the schedule, about an executive order that he is about to drop. And we've talked about this a lot, with great reporting from Bloomberg's White House team in the formation, the creation of this EO. We've actually been waiting for this for weeks, and here we are today. This will be the topic of conversation at the picnic. You've heard of this before if you've been with us on the program here. Reaching a certain threshold of illegal border crossings would trigger essentially a shutdown of the border, would effectively prevent new asylum claims by migrants who walk across the border until levels drop by roughly 2/3 of where they stand. Okay, so here are the actual numbers. Where's the cutoff? The measure would kick in when levels hit roughly 2,500 crossings per day. Authorities, for perspective, recorded about 4,300 crossings per day, encounters, rather, I want to be specific, per day in April with undocumented migrants between ports of entry, the most recent data available. It gives you a sense of the numbers here. Now, when we talk about restricting the definition of asylum and so forth, included in that Senate negotiated compromise that went nowhere the end of last year, beginning of this year, we don't see so much of that in the EO, but we're going to let this come out a little bit later on today when the president speaks. Although first, we speak with Maria Fernanda Bosmosky, who was with us during the debate in the Senate and back now that we have paper at the White House. Deputy Director of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council. Maria, it's great to see you. Thank you for giving us your time today. Is this the right thing for Joe Biden right now?
Thanks for having me again on the show, Joe. I think that this is perhaps the most aggressive attempt from Joe Biden to address the border situation. He knows very well that elections are right around the corner. Mexico just had its election on Sunday, and we saw there will be a continuation of the Morena party under Claudia Sheinbaum. We expect the rhetoric around immigration, trade, and Mexico to start to heat up. And I think that this is his attempt and the Democratic Party's attempt to address the numbers at the border.
Well, we're going to hear a lot about this today from Democrats and Republicans, including, I'm sure, quite a bit of criticism, just as we heard from Republican lawmakers the last time around. It's interesting, though, Maria, to hear from Hispanic Democrats in the Capitol. Alex Padilla, Democrat, California. Joe Biden, quote, paralleling some of what the Trump administration tried to do unsuccessfully, unquote. Greg Caesar, Democrat, Texas, pushing back on Biden publicly if he pursues these policies. Quote, it's not going to help the president politically because I don't think Fox News is ever going to give him any credit anyway, unquote. Is there some truth to that?
I think that this is, again, his attempt to appear domestically as he's tough on the border and immigration. One of his talking points might be later tonight that he tried to do this in a bipartisan manner earlier this year, and it didn't happen. And now this is what he has to do in order to bring those numbers back down.
I want to mention that a statement is just out from the White House on this, even though we've not heard from the president yet. This is official, Maria. Quote, "We must be clear. This cannot achieve the same results as congressional action, and it does not provide the critical personnel and funding needed to further secure our southern border. Congress still must act," unquote. But you don't expect that to happen, do you?
Well, I think it's quite unlikely, but at the end of the day, and I think that if we read between the lines on that statement that you just read, this is a Band-Aid. This is a Band-Aid to a much bigger wound that needs aggressive surgery, and it needs a team of people from both sides of the aisle to come together and start to address something that is very clearly broken, which is the immigration policies of this system of this country.
Well, so this is far from comprehensive, right? This would lower the number of daily crossings that would allow the president a better story to tell. And I guess even if this were made permanent, it still wouldn't address the issue of demand at our southern border or security surrounding it, right?
Correct. And this executive action that has been unveiled today does nothing to address the issues that are driving thousands of people to the U.S. southern border every single day. And that's, as you've just mentioned, it's everything from security in Latin America and the Caribbean, it's economic opportunities. This is not addressing at all the root causes of migration. What we see at the border is just a symptom of a much larger problem that begins, as we repeatedly say, 3,000 miles south of the U.S. border.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a minute, because we spent quite a bit of time yesterday talking about Claudia Sheinbaum and a remarkable and historic election in Mexico. What is it going to mean, though, for policy at the border? The timing here is, I'm guessing, pretty difficult for this Mexican president-elect. 24 hours later, Joe Biden is rolling out an executive order to potentially close the border. But as a protege of President AMLO, or should we expect the same policies from Mexico?
Yeah, I think she had some time to celebrate her victory, but was quickly kind of reminded of the gigantic task that lays ahead for her and for Mexico. The timing of this executive order is probably not coincidental at all. He was waiting for that election on Sunday. Claudia thus far has said that she thinks the United States can do more to address, again, the pushing factors in Central America and Latin America and the Caribbean. We expect to see some continuation from the Sheinbaum administration on the policies that President López Obrador has carried out thus far. She has been very explicit, though, in saying that with the United States, she will seek a collaboration and cooperation and not a relationship where Mexico is subordinate to the United States. I think we'll have to see who's part of her team, and we'll see where her policies carry her.
Just lastly, Maria, what happens to the border if Donald Trump wins the election?
I think we'll have to see whether he has a willing partner in Mexico to kind of work on, as he has in the past with López Obrador. I think that, Donald Trump, were he to come to the Oval Office once again in January, needs to recognize that Mexico, with the election that we just had, not only the strong mandate that Claudia Sheinbaum has, but also the composition of her Congress. She and Morena right now has 24 out of 31 governorships. Morena is pretty strong, and I don't expect Donald Trump to have an easy time pushing her to cave into some of his eventual demands.
Well, we'll have a lot more to talk about in that scenario. Maria, I'm glad you could come back and see us. Thank you for your time. From the Atlantic Council, Maria Fernanda Bosmosky with us live on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where we're going to go to Capitol Hill now, because the reaction in the Capitol, along with some of the other things that we're seeing upon the return of lawmakers this week, has our attention. And Bloomberg Government's Zach Cohen, as always, is reporting on it. Zach joins us from Capitol Hill. Now, it's good to see you, sir. Will there be a congressional answer to this? I know that when we talk later, for instance, with Congressman Brian Stile, he'll probably point me to H.R. 2, but the White House says this is not enough and Congress must act on the border. What do you think?
I think the reason that we're seeing the Biden administration act on with an executive order as opposed to seeking some sort of bipartisan legislation is precisely because Republicans blocked a previous effort, not once but twice, to include some kind of bipartisan, comprehensive border security legislation. That was opposed by, I should say, not just by the majority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate, but also by a significant number of progressives who are worried that it didn't have some of the immigration reform proposals that they've been championing for decades. And so Biden is seeing this as an opportunity, in the absence of any sort of bipartisan collaboration here on Capitol Hill, to go the executive order route. Republicans have kind of panned this as an 11th hour attempt to try to bring down migration flow numbers as Biden seeks re-election. He's due to be renominated as Democrats' pick for president in Chicago in August, and then on to the general election, likely against former President Donald Trump. And the border security will certainly be one of the top issues in that election. Republicans have made sure to mention that plenty of times.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. We were discussing with Maria the reaction, Zach, by some Hispanic Democrats, giving this a big thumbs down, comparing Joe Biden to Donald Trump in some cases. Do we have another issue here, kind of like Israel, where the president will now succeed in angering both sides?
Well, certainly we've seen that with some Democrats who have said that, look, this bill doesn't have enough to tackle border security. It certainly doesn't have anything that they've been championing for a long time, for instance, to help undocumented immigrants known as dreamers who came here as children. This is an issue that's been very thorny for President Biden as he's tried to appeal to centrist Democrats and independents who say that something needs to be done about this historic surge of migration across the southern border without alienating a really key part of the base, which has been Latinos, Hispanics, immigrants of all colors who have made up an increasingly swing part of the electorate, and a part of the electorate that Republicans have been contesting with more and more success over previous cycles. So certainly a hot topic and a delicate one for Democrats right now.
Zach, you've got a great piece today on the terminal, and you can find it online. Senate seniority to dip. Based on your analysis at Bloomberg Government, the average tenure of a senator will drop to below 11 years come January. We're going back to where we were during the Trump administration based on that metric, and I wonder what that means for the agenda in the Senate and for the leadership battle in the wake of Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, the Senate's not normally known for youth movements, but we're going to see something of one, at least on a relative basis. Our listeners obviously know Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, is stepping down as leader in November, and that's going to create an opportunity for a younger senator, maybe John Thune, John Cornyn, Rick Scott, to take that job. But more overlooked is the amount of turnover we're going to see in congressional committees, which actually are the driving force behind most of the legislation here on Capitol Hill, the ones actually crafting the must-pass bills that do make their way all the way to the president's desk, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. That's especially in the energy committees, where both of the top Republicans, or excuse me, both of the top Democrats leading there, as well as one of the top Republicans. The top Democrat of the Foreign Relations Committee is retiring, and the runner-up is under indictment for corruption, Bob Menendez in New Jersey, and may be eyeing the exit as well, even though he's running for re-election as an independent. Agriculture, another one of those issues where we're going to see some turnover. And so on all of those issues, you're going to elevate younger, potentially more progressive members into those jobs, and certainly changing the flavor of what Democrats talk about on those committees and what priorities they push forward.
Yeah, these are big jobs, important jobs. You talked to Senator Tom Carper for your story, who referred to a real brain drain that's coming. As Trent Lott, who weighs in as well, refers to the nooks and crannies, the tricks of the place. Does it leave us with a less effective Senate in our remaining moment here, Zach?
There's certainly the benefit of staffers who will continue to staff these committees, and especially those with a lot of expertise in a particular area will continue to work on those committees and guide those senators and their key staff through the must-pass legislation. But there's something to be said for the lack of institutional knowledge when senators who have been here for 20, 30 years eventually eye the exit. They don't, their replacements don't necessarily know what the intent behind a law was when the executive branch is trying to enforce it, and then don't have the wherewithal to challenge that in the courts, or maybe don't have those bipartisan relationships on the Hill in order to get stuff done. And so certainly
it's really worth the read. It's great work, Zach. We appreciate your time joining us today on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
It's 12:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all in the red. S&P right now very close to session lows, down 0.4%, lower by 22 points now on the S&P at 52.61. The Dow is down 63, a decline of 0.2%, while NASDAQ is down 65, a drop there of 0.4%. 10-year yield 4.33% with a 2-year that's yielding 4.77%. Gold is down 1.1%, 23.24 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil is trading lower as well, down 1.4% right now, 73.19 a barrel. Axos Financial, which has lent to properties including former President Trump's flagship New York Tower, plunged today after Hindenburg Research said it was short the stock because of the bank's exposure to problematic commercial real estate loans. Axos down now by 7.4%. Recapping, stocks are lower. S&P down 22, drop there of 0.4% on a down day for the rest of the market. Bitcoin up right now by 2.6%. Bitcoin back above $70,000, $70,930 right now on Bitcoin. Balance of Power continues. Back we go to Washington, and once again your host, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Charlie Pellet with his eye on Wall Street for us every day here on the fastest show in politics. I'm Joe Matthew in the nation's capital. Thanks for joining us today on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube. As we wonder about the summer in Washington and whether anything will get done, it's starting to look a lot less likely. We mentioned the letter yesterday from Mike Lee promising to blockade anything coming out of the White House. And a little thing happened on Friday that's worth talking about, because everybody went home for the weekend and did their cookouts and all that without talking about SAB 121. Kaylee's ears must be burning in the other room right now. I haven't had a chance to bring it up. The Security and Exchange Commission Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. What could this mean? It ended up in a veto at the White House. And a lot of folks are wondering, after the FIT 21 bill passed, with a crypto heaven in the House, Ether, ETFs get approved, it's a brand new day. But maybe not for this White House. That's where we start this week with our pal Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Great to see you, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
What the heck happened there? And are we getting a little over our skis when it comes to crypto as long as Joe Biden's in the White House?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny that we're talking about an SEC staff accounting bulletin.
Yeah, this is as wonky as you're ever going to make me here.
Exactly. So for the listeners that aren't aware, you know, this essentially is an SEC directive on the accounting front telling banks that you cannot hold crypto assets unless you count them as liabilities. And the banks are going to be like, well, we're going to limit how much we do here. Now, the reason why it got to the White House is because Congress, through both the House and the Senate, approved a Congressional Review Act, a CRA resolution to try and overturn the SEC. And in fact, 60 senators voted for this, including Senator Schumer out of New York. Wow. And so that sort of made a lot of the crypto world thinking, okay, well, wait a minute, we've got some bipartisan work here. With the FIT 21 House vote attracting 71 Democrats, all of a sudden the crypto world's like, wait a minute, we got something here.
Yeah, bring me some stable coin.
Exactly. Now, the problem is that President Biden had 10 days to veto this, and he didn't give the crypto world any indication on what he was thinking. But then Friday afternoon, late business, late evening dump, we get the notification that he did veto it. Now, the question we're getting from crypto clients is, how do we reconcile the two? Okay. Now, what our view is that the Biden administration is still not on board, comfortable with this idea of overturning crypto policies that are being dictated by their regulatory agencies, namely the SEC. However, I do anticipate additional congressional efforts this year, probably over at the Senate Ag Committee through Senator Stabenow. She's been working on some crypto stuff with Senator Lummis and Gillibrand. I think you're going to see some more crypto bills coming out later this year. Okay. But ultimately, that's probably it. Maybe stable coins. Every day we talk about stable coins. I don't see the bill. I get less and less comfortable that something's going to pass there. So it may have to be dictated by the election and what we would see next year.
Well, this is interesting. Joe Biden called the effort to repeal the SEC decision a Republican-led resolution. But you just told us that the Democratic leader of the Senate was on board.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a Republican-led idea. I mean, I don't think Senator Schumer would have actually gone and said, I'm going to do this myself. But ultimately, we are seeing bipartisan, what I call warmth, coming out of some of the Democrats. Not those that are in power in terms of Senate Banking Committee and Senator Sherrod Brown, for example, but we are seeing in advance of the election this openness to try and work with the crypto world. There have been news reports out there that even staffers at the White House have been reaching out to crypto companies trying to talk. Because look, on the other side, you have President Trump out there in campaigning saying, "I love crypto.
He's selling NFTs for credit.
Send me Bitcoins. I'm going to accept it as part of my campaign, but I'm also going to open up the crypto regulatory world for you." Even there was a Bloomberg News report that Elon Musk is advising him on crypto. So I think there's a lot of election, what if scenarios being played out.
Some motivation here for Joe Biden to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
But he just vetoed this.
Yeah.
Would he sign a stablecoin bill?
I think he would sign a stablecoin as long as Treasury and Maxine Waters, the ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee, is on board.
Okay, sure.
We've heard that they are still negotiating. We've heard that they're still open. They're close. But look, they've been close we've been talking about this for a year and a half now.
Been a long time.
So if I don't see the legislation coming out in the next few weeks, then it's going to have to be a lame duck bill, and anything can, lame duck really just depends on what happens in the election.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you what. You add the Dogecoin dog dying. I mean, you can look at this a couple different ways, Nathan. It's this bad joke. I'm sure they'll find me on Twitter. That did happen, though, right? The Dogecoin dog.
Yep.
Yeah. But terribly sad. So it brings us to the idea that nothing much is going to happen the rest of this Congress. And so the timing is pretty easy for Mike Lee to throw up the roadblocks in this new letter. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, right? Judicial nominations, any Biden administration priorities that come to the Senate will be stopped in their tracks. We're actually showing that letter for our listeners on YouTube. Easy for Mike Lee to say that now that we're kind of done for the year, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was political theater. I mean, there are three things that he said in this letter. Is one, he was not going to agree to any nominations. Well, look, the filibuster for the nominations doesn't exist right now. Senator Schumer will just continue 50 votes if necessary. No agreement to non-defense spending. Well, look, the appropriations is going through right now in the House. They've said that they want to get 12 appropriation bills done before August. It's probably not going to happen. We're going to have to kick the can in September. Senator Lee's probably not going to be involved in those discussions either. And then also just not agreeing to any Democratic priorities. Now, the one thing that I would think is interesting on there is Senator Vance and Senator Marshall both signed that letter. They have been working with Democrats on legislation. But you can always just say, look, this isn't a President Biden Democrat legislation. This is, a bipartisan legislation. So there's a lot of wiggle room that Senator Lee could use to get out of it, if he will. I think it's a political exercise. I mean, also, just remember, he's writing this is in response to the President Trump trial up in New York, which was state. President Biden doesn't have anything to do with that.
It's funny how that works. I mean, the chorus asked Marjorie Taylor Greene. You would think that Joe Biden was actually the judge in Lower Manhattan. It is a state court, but there's a defund New York movement coming courtesy the gentlelady from Georgia on the House side. None of this is going anywhere, though, right?
No, it's not going to go anywhere, but it's good politics. I mean, look, you have to placate to your base. And if your base is feeling this and you're seen out there fighting, then it's good politics. But it doesn't hurt anything to just offer up legislation. It doesn't cost you anything. It's not really hard.
Sure.
Hey, staffer, go write me some legislation. I'm just going to throw it out there. So it's an easy exercise for a lot of these policymakers to do. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not even going to be a discussion, I think, when we get to a shutdown.
We're back then to the Farm Bill. That's going to be kind of the only product that comes out of this Congress between now and the election, the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's three things. It's the Farm Bill and, the general government spending bill that's due September 30th. Always keep in mind the NDAA is out there. They can always kick the can on that one. But really, it's just, I think a lot of it now is, hey, let's just wait for the election and see what plays out. And if you get an election where President Trump wins, I think the lame duck period is really quiet. If you get an election where President Biden wins, then there could be some opportunities for lame duck chances for like marijuana banking or something like that. But for the rest of the year, I think it's going to be a lot of judges and post offices.
We asked Patrick McHenry about that the other day. Wouldn't touch the lame duck. But you're right. There are some things happening in Washington. Tell us nothing gets done around here. Nathan put this in front of me today. The U.S. House of Representatives on Monday passed legislation, and this is a big deal in Little Rock, boy, to rename the post office in Kingsland, Arkansas, after Johnny Cash, who says nothing is getting done in Congress.
You know, it's actually fun to watch these post office names because you never know who's going to get one. And
people like to joke, well, they're just up there naming post offices, but they really did do that yesterday.
yeah, absolutely. Unanimous consent. There were no Johnny Cash haters out there.
No. Great story, though, about Johnny Cash and this little bank, huh?
You know, my favorite song is his rendition of
rather.
Hurt. That's my favorite.
Okay, but I mean, I thank you. I wish we could cue that up for Nathan. He actually was at the post office to cut the ribbon on this thing when it opened.
1994, I think it was.
Remarkable history here. Yes, 1994 with his wife, June Carter Cash, also on hand, and they made a stamp in his honor. I'd say it's only appropriate. That was bipartisan, right?
Yep, absolutely unanimous consent.
Based on what we're seeing in this Merrick Garland hearing today, that might be the best thing that happens this week in House of Representatives.
And, you know, also we had Representative, the gentleman from Tennessee, his son yesterday came onto the floor. And,
that was brilliant, yes.
And, you know, gave us a little bit of...
Thank God for C-SPAN.
Yeah, exactly.
Good to see you, Nathan. Find him on the terminal. That's right, Matt. Folsom Prison Mail. It's coming. And, of course, on the website with Bloomberg Intelligence, the great Nathan Dean. Now, we're going to assemble our panel next. Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us this day after the post office was named. We're going to talk about the border executive order. That's going to happen, by the way, at 2 o'clock Eastern time, so about 90 minutes from now, at least so says the schedule. Joe Biden will be speaking from the White House to drop the executive order, which has already technically been dropped in text form. So we've got this real, it's official from the White House this afternoon in Washington. We'll bring you the president's remarks later when he speaks. First, let's check world and national news. Amy Morris joins us with that from the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Joe. Narendra Modi vowed to continue as India's prime minister even after his party lost its majority in parliament, forcing him to rely on allies to form a government for the first time since he came to power a decade ago. Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party was leading in 240 seats. That's short of the 272 needed for a majority. His National Democratic Alliance has 293 seats. That's enough to form a government if it sticks together. Modi's never been in a position where he's needed to rely on his coalition partners to govern. Attorney General Merrick Garland forcefully rebuked what he described as unprecedented attacks on the Justice Department, telling Republicans who sought to hold him in contempt that he will not be intimidated.
If anyone threatens public servants with violence, we will hold them accountable. And we will continue to protect our democratic institutions like this one.
During a hearing before the House Judiciary Committee, Garland condemned the conspiracy theory pushed by Donald Trump's allies that the department was behind Trump's state court prosecution. He called that unsupported claim an attack on the judicial process itself. Opening statements got underway today in the federal trial of Hunter Biden on firearms charges. Prosecutors began with a fiery opening statement saying, quote, "We're here because of the defendant's lies and choices. No one is above the law. It does not matter who you are or what your name is." Now, yesterday, a federal judge sat a jury of 6 men and 6 women. 4 other women were also chosen as alternates, but one juror had to drop out overnight, saying that she lives more than an hour away and being unemployed can't afford to make the commute. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
6:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. After this morning's economic data, we've got stocks moving lower. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all in the red. Just a week away from the next Fed meeting, the so-called JOLTS report showed U.S. job openings fell to the lowest level in over 3 years amid a broad slowdown. S&P right now down 15, decline there of 0.3%. Dow Industrials down 27, a decline of 0.1%. NASDAQ down 44, a drop of 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.33% with a 2-year 4.77%. We've got gold down $27 the ounce, lower by 1.1%. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 1.2%, 73.32 for a barrel of WTI. Bitcoin closing in on 71,000 right now, 70,925 Bitcoin today, up 2.6%. By traditional measures, America's economy is doing okay with robust labor, housing, and stock markets, but a new survey paints a very different picture. With that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
A majority of America's middle class, some making $150,000 or more, say they're struggling financially, and they anticipate they'll struggle for the rest of their lives. The new survey uses cost of living data to gauge economic well-being. Almost half of those surveyed don't even have $500 in the bank. The survey is from the National True Cost of Living Coalition, a project of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies and the Community Service Society of New York. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
On a down day for the rest of the markets, Cisco shares are up 0.8%. Cisco plans to invest $1 billion in startups that are working on what it calls secure and reliable artificial intelligence services. That word from the Cisco Live conference in Las Vegas. Recapping, stocks lower, S&P down 14, down 0.3. Balance of power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, here's your host, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube. It's good to see you as we anticipate breaking news from the White House. They already dropped it in text form. The EO on the border. Joe Biden will speak around 2, we're told, at least according to the White House, 2 p.m. Washington time, just in time for Bloomberg Business Week. We'll be listening and very curious if he answers any questions with the border in sight today. We saw this coming. We told you it was going to happen, and we've had a good conversation about it so far this hour. The idea, pretty simple. As I read in the statement from the White House today, quote, President Biden believes we must secure our border, period. That is why today he announced executive actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. And they would shut down the border, according to our reporting, when we get to certain numbers. We've already talked about this. In fact, Bloomberg did a great job breaking this down. Border crossings would be stopped. The border would effectively be closed to asylum seekers once crossings hit roughly 2,500 per day. This is between ports of entry. Recalling the data we already shared, authorities recorded about 4,300 crossings or encounters per day in April between ports of entry. Then we would need to see a precipitous decline, roughly 2/3, before the border will reopen. Republicans have already heard about this. They've already criticized it on the air. This is the very factor they pointed to when the Senate compromise was declared, DOA. So let's assemble our panel. They're awfully familiar with it. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors, are with us once again on the fastest show in politics. Let's go, Jeannie. Joe Biden says he's going out on his own, but it also says in the statement that he's doing this in lieu of congressional action and that Congress still must act. But he's making people angry on both sides. Here we go again with this. You know, Republicans are already giving this a thumbs down. Sylvia Garcia, Democrat from Texas. There's enough voters out there generally don't want to see any of the Trump-era policies back that liken this to the Muslim ban. Alex Padilla, Democrat, California, Senator. Biden paralleling some of what the Trump administration tried to do unsuccessfully. What's Joe Biden trying to accomplish then?
I think what he's trying to do is to hit this ball right back to the Republicans. I mean, I think if we go back, first day in office, he puts forward an immigration bill. That goes nowhere in Congress. Then he creates and works with a really conservative senator in Jim Langford, Kristen Sinema, and others to get a bipartisan security bill. It wasn't even an immigration bill. It was a security bill. And they are able to work that out, and that is stopped for one reason, because Donald Trump knows that if it passed during Biden's administration, it would be good for Joe Biden, so they stepped away from that. So now Joe Biden is going to do exactly what Donald Trump did when he was in office. He is going to pass this EO. It'll likely be stopped in the courts, and then he is going to turn back to Congress and say, this requires congressional action. And that is the truth and always has been. So it's good politics for Joe Biden to hit this back to them, but it's not going to resolve the issue at the border. And that's the shame. And that is where we've been for decades now in this country.
So, Rick, if you're Joe Biden politically in this case, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually true. And I don't think this has anything to do with Congress. I think this has a lot to do with the fact that he's got about a 35% deficit when it comes to Donald Trump, when it comes to managing the border. And he has got to get in this game. It's the #2 issue in all the states that are the swing states. And he has no policy other than the kind of lame excuse that in year one of my administration, I presented a comprehensive immigration reform proposal that no one's acted upon. Sorry, that's what got you 35% less popular on managing the border. So he's got to have a conversation with the American people. He shouldn't care whether or not it's taken to the courts. He ought to stem the flow of migrants from the border right away, do whatever he can to legitimately peel it back. I mean, when you look at who's coming across, it's not just, people from Central America and Latin America. It's people from the Middle East. It's people from China. It's people from Eastern Europe. I mean, this is no longer a hemispheric issue, and everybody knows it but the White House. And so, to me, this is the first step, albeit late, in the process of reforming the border security issues, and Biden's got to start to look legitimate about this. He's got to look like he means it. And you know what? If he's got the left of his party who wants to fight it, think about what the Trump administration is going to do and start making a choice. Because right now, if he continues to cater to the left, he could lose the presidency on this issue alone.
Well, so Rick, does he look like he means it? Do you believe him?
I think it's the first step in that direction. I mean, I don't know why he waited 2 months since the death of the Senate bill in the hands of the Republican majority in the House and Donald Trump. This is a great way to post it up again and say, this is exactly what I had a bipartisan agreement to do, and now I'm going to implement it. And if the House Republicans want to try to stop a legitimate effort to try and stem the flow of migrants across the border, then I'm happy to fight with them over this. Because he's just got to walk the walk. It's no longer plausible politically for him to try and put out a speech and think that's going to change his image on the border.
Jeannie, Republicans certainly in the House, but Republicans largely in Washington balked at this daily cap of 2,500 illegal crossings. What do you mean 2,500? Shouldn't it be 0 illegal crossings? How does Joe Biden answer that?
Well, they're trying to answer it with this piece of legislation. And, the reality is this has everything to do with Congress. The founders gave Congress the power of the purse. It requires funding to address our really, really troubled immigration crisis. And there was a very tough border security bill that Joe Biden was very clear he approved of and was going to sign, and it was bipartisan. And you know what? The House Republicans sank it. And they sank it for one reason, because they didn't want to give Joe Biden a win and because Donald Trump told them to. So this has everything to do with Congress. He is hitting that ball right back to Donald Trump and the Republicans to say once again, from the first day of my administration to the bipartisan bill that by even the Wall Street Journal editorial described as the toughest border security bill in 100 years, you said no for purely political reasons. Now we're doing exactly what Donald Trump asked for, and you have a problem with it again. Let's not forget the architect of this EO is Stephen Miller. It is the same thing Donald Trump tried unsuccessfully. The courts batted it back. They will likely do it again. So for Republicans to cry foul on this, what are they asking for? The reality is they don't want to address this issue for the pure reasons that Rick just talked about, which is a political poll advantage that they see helping them in November. And so Joe Biden's got to make that case repeatedly. He is too late on this EO, but we know why it's coming now. They wanted to wait until the Mexican election the other day, and that's why it's coming now.
Well, you guys are both rolling today, and I do want to point you to Section 212F, Jeannie, to your point, that is correct. And when we think about the courts, 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, that is the same authority that Donald Trump tried to invoke and did not always hold up in court. But Rick, when you think about the bigger picture here and the fact that the border has become such a major issue for households across the country, producer James put this in front of me today. Majority of middle-class Americans say they struggle financially, but it's worse than that. This is the National True Cost of Living Coalition. A poll commissioned by this group finds almost 2/3 of Americans considered middle class say they're facing economic hardships and do not anticipate a change for the rest of their lives. Is that not what's motivating, in some cases, people's opinions about immigration?
Yeah, there's a part of that. I mean, there's a part of people, when you look at the focus groups, you know, people are saying, look, I don't get it. I'm struggling with my own economy, and, you know, the borders are wide open, and these folks are coming from all over the world, and they're taking jobs, and they're you know, like I saw one that was amazing. Oh, let me get this right. You put these people up into hotels in New York, you give them a stipend for food, and you find them a job. Who's doing that for me? And they've got a point. So, yeah, I think it does have an impact on that, especially those voters, working class voters outside the cities without college educations who have never really recovered since the 2008 great financial collapse. And these are the voters who are switching from being reliable Democratic working class voters to becoming Trump voters. And this is one of the main problems and leakages from the Biden coalition that at least Biden has to do something to try and get them to look back his way. They voted for Biden before, they voted for Obama before, and now they're voting for Donald Trump. And Biden will be hard pressed to win this election if they continue to migrate to the Republicans.
I'd love to hear from you on this, Jeannie, to the extent that people feel like the economy is driving their opinions here on the border, that they don't have a piece of the economy, or certainly are being treated by the government the way Rick just describes, the way they see some migrants in this country. That may not be based on reality, but it's perception here that matters. Does Joe Biden speak to them today?
He absolutely has to, not just today, but going forward, and not just for electoral reasons, but because the issue of immigration has been a crisis in this country for decades, and it continues to be. And that is true whether you're talking Republican or Democratic presidents, including Donald Trump, who was elected in part to resolve this issue. And I don't believe through a fault of his own, because it's much bigger than any single president, was unable to make much headway. And of course, the economics of this campaign and of the reality we're living in today really cast a shadow over everything, including immigration. And when you dig down in some of these numbers, you see particularly the middle class feeling like they have been left behind for far too long. And of course, people want to cast blame on people who they feel are, getting things that they should be getting and benefit in ways that they should be benefiting. It is a problem. You talk about New York City. The reality is is the New York City budget cannot handle the influx of migrants, nor can the border towns. So it has to be resolved. But the reality is this has got to be comprehensive immigration reform. Security first, but comprehensive reform after. And what Donald Trump is proposing, mass deportations and other things, will do nothing to resolve the economics of the problems that people are facing. So yeah, good talking points if you want to scare people, but from a realistic standpoint, it's not a policy prescription. And everybody in Congress knows that, and they haven't acted for political reasons for decades on this.
A great conversation with our panel. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, I thank you so much for the insights. Our panel will be back, of course, in our second hour to talk about a lot more of what's happening today in politics. And we're going to be hearing from the president on this very issue live when he speaks from the White House. That's scheduled to be about 1 hour from now. My question is, will he take a question from the reporters who are there? Stay with us. I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
politics to the world of business. This is Balance of Power.
President Biden issues an executive order today to keep migrants who cross the border illegally from receiving asylum. Welcome to the fastest show in politics. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington alongside Kaylee Lines. And it's not the first time, Kaylee, we have heard this idea of shutting down the border when illegal crossings reach a certain level. We're going to hear from Joe Biden about an hour from now.
Yeah, he's set to speak from the White House in the 2 p.m. hour. And the certain level we're talking about, Joe, is roughly 2,500 crossings per day. We are well above that now. So effectively, as a result of this executive order today, the border will shut down for migrants seeking asylum. And it's already getting some blowback from progressive Democrats, and it's likely to face legal challenges as well.
This is true. We've been down this road before. This is a previously aired proposal, now in the form of an executive order that we did tell you was coming if you were with us here on Balance of Power several weeks ago at this point. But you're right, Kaylee, he's upsetting in many cases Democrats in the House, already upsetting many Republicans with this. We're going to talk to one of them, Brian Stile from Wisconsin, coming up this hour.
Yeah, we'll be with the congressman in just a few minutes. Plus, we'll get the full details from Bloomberg White House correspondent Josh Wingrove. First, though, as always, we kick it off with a check on the markets with Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Joe and Kaylee. It is a choppy trading session right now. We have got the Dow higher, right to the numbers. Little change, though, up 2 points. We've got the S&P lower by 11, down 0.2%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index is slumping 31 points, down 0.2%. But the bond market climbed as further signals of labor market cooling reinforce speculation that the Federal Reserve will be able to cut rates this year. 10-year right now, 4.32%, with a 2-year yielding 4.76%. Gold is down 1.1%, 23.24 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 1.3%, 73.25 a barrel, and Bitcoin pushing higher by 2.5%, back above 70,000, 70,766 right now on Bitcoin. Axos Financial, which has lent to properties including former President Donald Trump's flagship New York Tower, plunging today after Hindenburg Research said it was short the stock because of the bank's exposure to problematic commercial real estate loans. Right now, we've got shares of Axos lower by 7.5%. Again, recapping, stocks are trading mixed. S&P little changed right now, down by about 0.2%, lower by 12 points. The Dow just turning negative, down now by less than 0.1%. Balance of Power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines.
All right, Charlie Pellet with a check on where things stand in the markets around 1 p.m. Eastern time, which means we're just about an hour away from expected remarks from President Joe Biden about the executive order he's issuing today related to the border. It'll be interesting to hear, Joe, how he toes the line between trying to appeal to those critics who have been critical of this administration and its policies toward the border, and then those progressives who may think that this is going too far and potentially alienating a key demographic.
You know, it's kind of like the issue surrounding his policy with Israel, where he's managed to upset people on both ends of the political spectrum here. We're going to hear from the president in less than an hour, assuming he's on time. And we're joined now at the table by Bloomberg White House correspondent Josh Wingrove, who's been far out on this story. This is something that we've been reporting on for a couple of weeks in anticipation of this executive order dropping. Josh, it's great to see you. We're going to be talking with critics all day who are questioning, to begin with, the number. What is this 2,500 number? Why should 2,500 people be allowed to cross the border illegally every day?
The starting point, officials have told us, is that bipartisan bill. And that talked about, or in the negotiations for that, they zeroed in on about 4,000. What they've done here is pick 2,500, which appears to be the net when you take out the people that make appointments. And those are allowed to happen. In other words, asylum claims are still open as of tomorrow if you have an appointment and go to a port of entry. What's closing are the people that simply walk across the border between points of entry. And backing up here, I mean, we have just dealt with this for years. I mean, we dealt with this in Trump's first campaign against Hillary Clinton. Biden, very early in his presidency, proposed an immigration bill, went nowhere. Neither party really, has any interest in it for various reasons. Used to be that the grand bargain was border stuff for immigration stuff. Not so much. And now the bipartisan bill collapsed. Trump had a lot of pressure on to kill it. And Biden has decided to try and do something, even though it is certain to be challenged. The ACLU has already said that they will challenge it. I will leave it to lawyers to say whether that will be struck down. The Democrats themselves have said that congressional action is the safest path. In other words, they're not willing to bet the farm that this thing will hold up, and that's where we're at.
Well, and even in the release that the White House put out, the statement, they said, we must be clear this cannot achieve the same results as congressional action. So perhaps they're trying to get in front of that narrative. But what we're hearing out of Congress, Josh, is Republicans on the one side essentially critical that he didn't exercise this authority way sooner, that he's waiting to do it until now. On the other side, you have the likes of Senator Alex Padilla, who in a statement today said President Biden has undermined American values with this decision. Is there real winning on this issue for the president?
I guess he's hoping that there's a silent majority in the middle, and we're kind of up in the air right now on where those swing state Democrats fall. Some border Democrats, Mark Kelly in Arizona, for instance, have come out in favor of this. We'll be looking at 2 o'clock to see who will be there. It doesn't sound like a lot of the swing state senators, the ones that are up. Tammy Baldwin, Wisconsin, for instance, will be there. So it's not just progressives who are mad about it or people that are sort of immigration reform advocates like Senator Padilla, but where will those sort of middle-of-the-road types go? We do in our story have Ann Custer saying that she thinks that this will appeal to sort of moderate swing voters. In our polls, people are worried about this right now. It is the second top issue, second only to the economy when you ask people to name their single thing. Now, though, when you drill down, it's more Republicans that are worried about it, then followed by that independents, which is the problem. Democrats aren't so worried about it. Biden is basically trying to woo independents. The power he's using is Section 212F. That is what Trump used. Trump got the courts tied up in the courts with it as well. It would be fair to assume Biden will be tied up to some extent in the courts with it. This is essentially a loophole that they're trying to drive a big Mack truck through to get things going.
Well, it's going to be a fun congressional picnic tonight on the South Lawn, I'm guessing.
It'll be great. And this is 2 days after the Mexican election, by the way.
Well, and that has a lot to do with the timing, we understand. Would Republicans support this if the president set the daily cap at 0?
They might more.
Why not?
Well, I think a lot of Republicans want the issue to campaign on regardless. So if you set the cap at 0, they might find different ways to do it.
But why not set the cap at 0?
Because there's a legal right to asylum claims under international law and under American law, and that is what is probably going to lead to these challenges and may well end up getting struck down. Now, they're trying to get around that with exemptions. For instance, unaccompanied minors, this will not apply to. For instance, people in extreme health certainty, for instance, if you're, parched and at risk of, dying of thirst in the desert, you can walk across America, you won't get arrested or whatever.
But outside of legal asylum claims at ports of entry, why not set the cap to 0?
Because they believe that you can make asylum claims as an irregular crosser. You don't necessarily need an appointment. But even the legal pathways they're creating have attracted political blowback. And Biden's whole philosophy is people will wait in line if there's a line that's moving, right? And so they think that if they create these legal pathways, it'll lessen the incentive for people to pay thousands of dollars for some smuggler to drag them across Mexico and put them into the U.S. And so what they're trying to do is sort of short-circuit that now ahead of summer months where things normally rise. And if this year is the same as other years, Biden would be facing rising numbers heading into election, which he doesn't want, and hope that people will sort of go the other route, which is this CBP1 app. Obviously, I roll my eyes if my bank asked me to use an app, let alone trying to, So we'll see. The jury's out, I think, obviously, on whether that will be. Everyone agrees that Congress would have stronger powers here. And so look forward to the next Congress. The odds of one party holding all 3 levers don't seem particularly high. It's certainly possible. And so if they are, will this happen? I don't know. Some of the Republicans who were fans of the original bipartisan bill urged their Republican colleagues to take it because they didn't think Democrats would have as much incentive to make a deal. So even if Republicans were to sweep the House, Senate, and presidency in the elections, the odds that they get a comprehensive reform through, I don't know.
Well, we're going to talk to one Republican lawmaker now.
That's right.
Josh Wingrove, Bloomberg White House correspondent. Great reporting. Thank you, so much. We go now live to Capitol Hill, where Republican Congressman Brian Stile of Wisconsin is joining us. He's the chair of the House Administration Committee, also a member of the Financial Services Committee. Congressman, welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. You have been on this program repeatedly in the past, talking about President Biden not exercising authority that he has when it comes to the border. It seems today he is doing so. Does he deserve credit for that?
What he's doing today is woefully insufficient. Joe asked the right question. Why not set it at 0? And it should be noted that this only addresses one of the 3 key buckets of individuals who are entering the country. This is addressing the bucket of individuals who are entering through non-ports of entry. Think about somebody wading across the Rio Grande River. and coming in and claiming asylum. We saw about 2.4 million of those individuals last year. This would throttle that down to about 900,000 individuals. It does nothing to address what we call known gotaways. Last year, roughly 600,000 individuals who were observed entering the country, but who got away, and we have no idea who those individuals are. And the third bucket is the 1,500 individuals a day, roughly another 500,000 people per year who are coming through legal ports of entry. And so the action by the president is woefully insufficient to a challenge as large as he has created. He needs to take a series of executive actions, all of which are under his authority, to actually and truly secure the border.
Well, I do know that you want more, Congressman, and I anticipated that you would give us an answer like that. But if this would, in fact, lower crossings, illegal crossings on any level, and it appears to be by thousands, why not do this now and ask for more after?
There's nothing wrong with the president taking this executive action, but I think it's important for the American people to realize that this is woefully insufficient to address the crisis that he has created at the U.S.-Mexico border. The crisis is being felt not just in communities along the border, but being felt in my home state of Wisconsin and across the country. And so the president needs to take a series of executive actions, most importantly, to reinstate stay in Mexico, end the catch and release program, and end the abuse of the parole system, and restart border wall construction immediately. Again, he's taking a small step in the right direction, but woefully insufficient to address the challenge that he has created by allowing the U.S.-Mexico border to remain unsecured.
Well, the way the White House is characterizing this, Congressman, is that to actually adequately address the challenge would require congressional action. They said so in the statement. Of course, the president had agreed to a bipartisan compromise with Senate negotiators earlier this year that quickly died. I know that you're probably going to tell me that the House passed H.R. 2, but considering H.R. 2 was known to be dead on arrival when it passed the House, as it received not a single Democratic vote, and obviously the bipartisan border deal didn't end up going anywhere, should you not try to start fresh, try to find a compromise?
I'd critique a little bit of there what you said as it relates to the Senate bill. I think it's important to reflect back on the most recent vote on the Senate bill. They didn't even get all the Democrats on board. That's how broken the bill is that is called, as your term, bipartisan. My view would be the opposition to the bill is bipartisan. Only a fraction of the Democrats even voted for it because it doesn't work. The House-passed bill actually works. It actually secures the U.S.-Mexico border. It was passed now approaching a year ago. The Senate should act on it. If the Senate thinks that they can make amendments to make it better, make adjustments, I'd love to see that vote take place on the Senate floor. I actually think that it would pass in the Senate because it works. And the problem that's been created by this administration is so significant that actually there is a political need to act. Further, the president has a series of executive actions that he could take, over 60 in total, that he could take to substantively secure the U.S.-Mexico border. Again, the four easiest that are at the top of the table is reinstating the stay in Mexico policy, ending catch and release, restart border wall construction, and end abuse of the parole system. But there's a series of actions that he could take. The action he is about to take today, as reported, is woefully insufficient to actually address the crisis that is impacting every community across the country.
Well, it'll be especially insufficient if it's struck down in court, of course, Congressman, and I wonder what your thought is on that. Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, everyone's suddenly an expert every time this comes up again. We saw this not play well in court for Donald Trump in some cases when he invoked those authorities. If that happens again now, it's kicked back to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue and we start all over again, to Kayleigh's point, right?
Well, this is in large part where the House-passed border security package is so essential. We make essential reforms to the asylum system to end the abuse of the process. Importantly, what we're seeing right now is when individuals illegally enter the United States, they're often released with a notice to appear. In other words, a court date 3, 4, 5 years out. And at that point, they're released into the country and able to travel freely. What we should do is dramatically accelerate the process that we're reviewing those cases. And again, when they're reviewed, about 98% are ultimately rejected, meaning the vast majority of the individuals coming into the United States illegally are actually making an asylum claim that when adjudicated, when heard by a judge, are found to not be valid. And so we could dramatically increase the rate and scope of how we're processing those claims. Again, the House-passed border security package makes those adjustments to our asylum laws that are essential. if the court chooses to strike this down, which I don't think that they should do, but if they did, all the more reason the Senate should act on the House-passed border security legislation.
Congressman, one of your colleagues in the House, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, yesterday floated the idea of forcing an impeachment vote against President Biden over this issue of the border. If she succeeded in getting that on the floor, would you vote to impeach the president?
I think we got a big election coming up in November, and the American people are going to be able to have their say as it relates to the disastrous policies being put forward by President Biden. I think we are always better served when the American people are able to make that decision. I'm incredibly concerned with the actions of President Biden day in and day out. But at the end of the day, we're about 6 months away from the election. The American people are going to have their opportunity to have their voice heard.
Interesting, as the primary takes place today in the District of Columbia here in the capital city, Congressman, something is going to happen that's never happened before, as non-citizen residents are allowed to vote in primary elections to have a say in the communities that they live in. More than 500 non-citizen residents registering to vote and have cast their ballots here today. This is an issue that you have strongly opposed and tried to take action against as chair of the admin committee in the House of Representatives. Now that it's happening, what will it mean?
I've held a series of hearings on this exact point. I think it's important for all of your listeners and viewers to realize that today in our nation's capital, non-citizens are legally allowed to vote, in particular municipal elections, for things like city council. This includes individuals working in an embassy. So just to give you a flavor of how ridiculous the law is in our nation's capital, the front door to the country, an individual, say, working at the Russian embassy, residing in D.C. for only 30 days, is eligible to vote in our nation's elections. I'm of the view that U.S. elections should be for U.S. citizens only. We passed a bill here in the House to ban non-citizens from voting here in our nation's capital. The Senate has refused to act on that. I think that they should. And more broadly, we need to make sure that we're ensuring elections across the country are for U.S. citizens only. The fact that our nation's capital today is allowing non-citizens to vote in a primary election for positions like city council is absolutely absurd, and I think we need to change the law.
Congressman, we have just a minute left with you, but to what extent are you concerned about, in your home state of Wisconsin, people who shouldn't be legally allowed to vote attempting to do so?
This is a broader concern that we've had. We had a series of hearings, and what we have seen are non-citizens registered to vote illegally in other locations. In particular, Ohio recently identified a number on their voter rolls. Georgia did a proper check. Pennsylvania identified issues as well. I think at a period of time, we need to dramatically look at whether or not we have non-citizens on the voter rolls in states across the country. We need to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of our elections such that only U.S. citizens vote in our elections. At a period of time when 7 million people have come across the border illegally under President Biden's 3.5 years, where you have cities in jurisdictions like Washington, D.C., not only allowing but encouraging non-citizens to vote, I think it's absolutely imperative that we're making sure we're protecting the integrity of our elections by making sure our elections are for U.S. citizens only.
It's good to have you back, Congressman. Thanks for your insights today. Brian Stile, the Republican from Wisconsin, with us on the fastest show in politics. As we mentioned, less than an hour from now, Joe Biden is set to speak to the executive order on the border. With Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew. We'll have much more ahead with our panel. This is Bloomberg.
121 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Choppy session, very mixed market. We have got the Dow higher, the S&P NASDAQ, both in the red, right to the numbers, because the S&P now lower by 9. Off-session lows down 0.2%. The Dow up 32, up by 0.1%. NASDAQ, the composite index, down 28, drop there of 0.2%. The bond market climbed as signs of labor market cooling reinforce speculation that the Fed will be able to cut rates this year. 10-year, 4.32%. The 2-year, 4.76%. Gold lower by 1%. Spot gold now at $23.26 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.9%, 73.56 for a barrel of WTI. And Bitcoin back above 70,000 right now. Bitcoin up 2.1%, 70,560 on Bitcoin. Boston Beer shares are lower. They use the ticker symbol SAM, as in Sam Adams, one of its flagship products. The stock declining. The CEO of cannabis producer Green Thumb is pitching a deal to merge with Boston Beer. That, according to the Wall Street Journal. Green Thumb, for its part, says it is not commenting on market rumors. Again, we've got shares of Boston Beer down 0.5%. Green Thumb up 3.4%. Beer and weed. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues now. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
All right, Charlie Pellet with a look at the Tuesday trade. Thank you so much. I'm Kaylee Lyons alongside Joe Matthew here in Washington, where we're noting the fact, Joe, that it's not just any Tuesday, it's a primary Tuesday in a number of states.
Happy primary day.
Largely stopped paying attention to primaries as we have our presumptive presidential nominees. That doesn't mean that they're not worthy of at least some analysis, considering we do have primaries in Montana, which is going to be a key state in deciding the balance of the Senate, as well as in New Jersey, where there has been a lot of political intrigue about not just Senator Bob Menendez, who is currently on trial for bribery charges, but his son, who is facing a primary challenger today.
And shares the same first name. So it's interesting that, as we've been hearing from folks on the ground, some of the campaign signs have gone from Menendez to Rob because of a difficult association here with what his dad's going through. That's New Jersey's 8th district, Kaylee, and we can look ahead to some of these primaries, but of course it's all against the backdrop of this protest vote that we've been hearing about and watching just about every Tuesday. How many Nikki Haley votes will there be in the Republican primary in a state like New Jersey? That will be part of the story tonight as well.
Absolutely. As we've seen continuously, something in the ballpark of 20% of the Republican primary vote still going to Nikki Haley, even though she suspended her campaign months ago. This will be the first time, though, we get those results after Donald Trump's guilty conviction. And I wonder if it will actually prove to be a tell on as to how many more voters are trying to protest the fact that he's the presumptive nominee.
Really great point. Let's see what the panel thinks about it. Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us. Our signature panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors on Bloomberg TV and radio. What's your thought on that, Rick, as we anticipate votes tonight? Could we see an uptick for Nikki Haley following the guilty verdict, or might it look like the opposite?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's definitely been a rallying around Donald Trump to be expected after the indictment. Republicans, they still want to win elections, and he's the top of the ticket whether they like it or not. And yet, Nikki Haley's been cruising around 20 to 30% of the primary ballot. And in most of these states that have been selecting primary candidates since the presumptive nominee has, sort of taken charge. So this will be interesting. I think it's a bit of a tell. I've never put much credence on primary results as it relates to general election, and there's no real track record that they have an impact. But this is definitely an area that Nikki has now endorsed Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is now a felon. So maybe that boosts her up to the upper 30s, and we have a talking point for Wednesday.
Well, Jeannie, if that indeed does transpire, is that more telling than the mixed polls that we have gotten in the days after the verdict? Because that's real votes being cast.
It is. And, you know, for somebody to go out in a primary where, at least at the top of the ticket in this case, it doesn't matter all too much because, of course, we know who the presumptive nominees are on both sides, it is a tell. And I'm not sure how this is going to come off, quite frankly, because you could see it going either way. You could see people who, as it settles in that this is a convicted felon, say, hey, I'm going to go out there and cast my vote for somebody else. Or to Rick's point, you could see a sort of rally around the Trump effect, and people say this was political persecution. These are all Republicans, for the most part, voting in a primary after all, and it goes in the opposite direction. So I think we have to wait and see where this pans out, but I think it is a tell in terms of at least where Republicans are in this case. And of course, as you look at the Democratic side, you know, Joe Biden wants to make sure that there is not a lot of, you know, loss to an independent third party candidate because of what's going on in the Gaza Strip or any other issue. So on both sides, it is sort of an indication as to how at least the base of their party is feeling.
Well, you mentioned the Trump effect in the House, and it brings me to what's happening today, Jeannie. I'd love both of your take on this because we've had a knockdown, drag-out hearing with the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Everyone knew that would be the case as he testifies before some serious Republican critics here on the Judiciary Committee. This is Jim Jordan's committee. And he came out swinging in his own prepared remarks to try to blunt some of this. But beyond the Robert Hur testimony that the committee wanted to acquire, Joe Biden's testimony with the special counsel, beyond the contempt vote that went nowhere, there's something else going on here. Three members of the committee, this is Freedom Caucus, Andy Biggs, Chip Roy, Tom Massey, sent Merrick Garland a letter stating their concerns about aggressive prosecutions of those who were at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, the January 6th rioters. And they wanted to talk about the FBI. This is a quote from their letter. The FBI's possible involvement in facilitating the events of January 6th. This is like tinfoil hat time here, Rick, where we're talking about white vans and unmarked officers in the crowd. What does this tell us about the direction we're going in this Republican conference?
Yeah, it's a pretty dark direction that Republicans in the House, especially the Freedom Caucus Republicans, want to take the country. And that is basically creating their own set of facts. And in this case, just because they dream it up means that it should be a fact. And I think Merrick Garland going to the Capitol Hill and saying, no, these things are simply not true. No, Joe Biden is not the reason that Donald Trump got prosecuted in New York at a state level. No, the FBI was involved in January 6th. Here's the thing. If somebody doesn't say no to it, and frankly, I think the Biden administration has done a very poor job of pushing back on fake news that emanates from legitimate institutions like the House of Representatives and people like Donald Trump, then that's going to become true over time. And so I think the fact that the Attorney General is up there fighting the fight for facts is really important. And I don't understand why the Biden administration would not deploy their cabinet in an effort to do the same thing. Because Joe Biden can only get elected if the country is working off the same set of facts about the economy, about the border, about Gaza. And if he allows these fake facts to proliferate, you know, it's going to be very hard for him to find a clear path.
Jeannie, I'd love for you to weigh in on what Rick just said. Has the administration not been forceful enough in pushing back against mis and disinformation?
This is a challenge, I think, for all of us. You know, I look at this very broadly. We are living in a time when it is very, very difficult to break through all the noise that we all hear. And you can watch 2 channels and get the exact opposite take on what is happening. And misinformation, disinformation spreads broadly. And I think it speaks to a reality. And I wish the Biden administration, to Rick's point, would talk about this. This is why leadership matters so much. it is very, very difficult to police all this misinformation and disinformation. And that's why we've got to be able to trust the people we choose to lead us in an honest way. And that is where what's happening today on Capitol Hill is so frustrating, because there is not a scintilla of evidence that anybody in the FBI was behind January 6th. And yet you have elected leaders up there on the Hill asking the question. And so I think, you know, in a way, it's all of our responsibility as Americans when we go to the ballot box to remember that we have to choose people who we feel some modicum of trust in to tell us what is the truth, because this is where we are in this country, in this media environment. So no, you know, I don't think it's all at Joe Biden or the Biden administration's feet. He can use the bully pulpit as best as he can, but this is a problem that every president in the modern era is going to face from now, as long as our media environment remains the way it is. And so it's much bigger than Joe Biden.
Suggesting it may become more difficult, not get easier. It's a great panel. Thanks to both of you, as always, for showing grace with complex issues. Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributors, with us today in Washington. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons. It looks like we have potential breaking news, Kaylee, from Israel. We should mention this as it crosses the terminal now.
Yeah, that's coming from Matthew Miller, who's a State Department spokesman. He's saying in a briefing now that Israel is ready to implement the ceasefire deal. Remember, this is a deal that was outlined last week, Friday, when President Biden gave remarks from the White House talking about a three-phase plan. The first phase, of course, being a temporary ceasefire agreement and the exchanging of hostages. Despite Israel, I guess, at least rhetorically pushing back on this, certainly Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has done so in recent days. The State Department is saying, be that as it may, whatever you may be hearing, Israel is ready to implement this if Hamas agrees.
Well, yes, and let's see what form this takes. Obviously, to your points, phase one was a 6-week, I believe, ceasefire. Does it go beyond that? Hamas earlier said there would be no deal without a permanent ceasefire and an Israeli withdrawal. So if you put these two headlines together, we could be onto something.
Yeah, and of course, the permanency aspect is what has long been the issue. Right. Hamas looking for that, Israel not wanting to commit to that until Hamas is entirely destroyed. This is what negotiators and mediators have been working so hard on. So we'll keep you updated on that news as we get more. First, though, let's get some more news, world and national news with Amy Morris in the 99.1 Newsroom here in Washington. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Kaylee. Narendra Modi in India vowing to continue as India's prime minister. Even after his party lost its majority in parliament, Modi claiming victory for his coalition in a post on X, calling it a historical feat. Raghuram Rajan is a professor of finance at Chicago Booth School of Business and former head of the Central Bank of India.
It's actually a win for democracy, and that's good for India, because what democracy does is it allows the different parts to essentially express themselves and to negotiate.
Raghuram Rajan is a professor of finance at Chicago Booth School of Business. Attorney General Merrick Garland forcefully rebuking what he describes as unprecedented attacks on the Justice Department, telling Republicans who have sought to hold him in contempt that he won't be intimidated. During a hearing before the House Judiciary Committee, Garland condemned the conspiracy theory pushed by Donald Trump's allies that the department is behind Trump's state court prosecution in New York and that the FBI was authorized to kill Donald Trump.
This is dangerous. It raises the threats of violence against prosecutors and career agents. The allegation is false.
Garland called the unsupported claim an attack on the judicial process itself. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. A decidedly mixed market on this Tuesday, with the Dow Industrials just about the best level of the day right now, up 61 points, up by about 0.2%. The S&P lower now by 0.2%, dropping 9 points, while NASDAQ is down 37, a drop there of 0.2%. Bond market climbed as signs of labor market cooling reinforced speculation that the Fed will be able to cut rates this year. 10-year, 4.31%, 2-year, 4.74%. Gold is down $30 the ounce, down 0.9%, 23.30 right now on spot gold, while West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.8%, 73.60 for a barrel of WTI. Cannot ignore Bitcoin, back above 70,000, 70,400 right now on Bitcoin, up 1.9%. American Airlines is pushing a federal appeals court to overturn a decision invalidating its partnership with JetBlue, saying the ruling would prevent the airline from entering into future joint ventures. Shares of American higher today by 0.3%. JetBlue down now by 0.4%. Again, recapping, Dow Industrials push higher, up 71 points now, up 0.2%, while the S&P is down by 0.1%. Balance of Power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons.
Charlie Pellet, thank you. Keeping tabs on the markets for us here on Bloomberg TV and radio every day as we talk politics live from Washington. And it all starts at 6:15 p.m. Washington time. That's the annual congressional picnic on the South Lawn of the White House. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons. I can only imagine the conversation over hamburgers and hot dogs, because that will be less than 4 hours after the president speaks to the American people about this executive order he's dropping today on the border. He's going to be speaking from the East Room, at least according to the schedule, about 20 minutes from now. And Kaylee, as we've learned over the course of this hour, he's upsetting both ends of the political spectrum today with this announcement.
Yeah, of course, Republicans think he is not going far enough. Progressives may think he's going too far with this executive action that essentially, when crossings cross a threshold of 2,500 across the border, will shut down those seeking asylum. At least in some cases, there are carve-outs and exceptions here, and perhaps the exceptions are providing more fuel to the fire who are upset. The thing is, though, Joe, there's something else to consider here politically, and that is the implication this could have for the economy.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
Standard Chartered, Steve Englander, who's a great friend to Bloomberg TV and radio, put out research today that found roughly half of non-farm payrolls growth since October is accounted for by undocumented immigrants, according to his estimates, looking at data from U.S. Immigration Services, the Customs and Border Patrol, and others. He suggests if you take those workers out, job growth may actually be running at a much lower pace of 125,000.
Imagine that.
Per month.
So then couple the impact that this has had as well on shelter costs and housing immigrants in cities all over the country, not just New York, and the impact could be great. And you wonder if you keep walking this line, does this executive order hasten the first interest rate cut?
It's an excellent question. If it means more softening in the labor market, one could see how that argument could be made. But we want to pose these questions and more now to Rebecca Shih. She is founding executive director of the American Business Immigration Coalition. Rebecca, welcome to Balance of Power. How should we be thinking through the economic ramifications of this executive order today, of not allowing as many migrants to seek asylum in the U.S., something that will start effective immediately? How is this likely to impact the economy?
Thank you so much for having me. Today, the president is moving forward on this executive order to ensure legal and orderly processing and crossing. And this is going to have important impact on both the economy and our communities. I think you just mentioned that one of the reasons that our markets and economy continue to roar is because, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we have 2.1 million new migrants and new workers in the economy over this last 2.5 years. And this has made sure that jobs, particularly jobs in construction, hospitality, tourism, are filled despite our very tight labor market. And this has meant that, stock market is reaching historic highs, as we have seen. as well as tamping down inflation. And just the last thing I would add is that we see all the demographics data that average Americans are having less than replacement rate in terms of births. And this new energy, new entrepreneurships from both new migrants and long-term immigrants already here has been a gift to the economy and to our country.
Well, so as the president speaks to the American people then today, Rebecca, should he also be making an announcement about work permits?
That is something that we're hoping for as the American Business Immigration Coalition. We are a bipartisan group of about 1,400 employers and CEOs across the country. Over this last year, we have been leading a national campaign. We call it Here to Work, actually calling on the administration and the president to issue more work permits for both the new migrants as well as the long-term immigrant contributors. If you think about people that are picking crops, cleaning hotel rooms, emptying bedpans in nursing homes, or even designing semiconductors at our fabrication facilities. They're overrepresented and significantly contributed by immigrants of all skill levels. So having more work permits, legal work permits in the marketplace is a